Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Before you drift off, I thought it would be a nice idea if you can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. I started my first week as a ranger at Cedar Ridge. Dozing off desk wasn't part of the training, so when I noticed a light blinking from the old fire tower across the valley, I didn't quite know what to think. That tower's been abandoned since I was a kid. I remember hiking up there with my dad, wooden staircase rotting, platform sagging, but the electricity line was cut years ago. It shouldn't be lit. I watched through binoculars at 10 p.m. One flash, then another, steady enough to say someone was up there. I grabbed my jacket and keys and drove to the trailhead late. I called dispatch as I parked. I'm heading up to check on a possible intruder in the old fire tower. They said okay, just radio when I reached the base. The trail was empty and quiet. I passed the old ranger cabin halfway up, windows dark and locked as if nobody had been there for years. Step by step, my headlamp cut through darkness. I heard pine needles whisper underfoot, the wind sighing through branches, and a distant creak. At the last bend, I saw fresh footprints in the moist soil, size 10 boots heading up the steep switchbacks. No one had used that trail in months. My radio crackled, request for update. I whispered, I see prints. At the tower stump, the trail ended, and I had to climb a ridge of loose rock. I slid a couple times. When I reached the platform base, the light came into full view. Someone had strung a battery lantern inside the tower, and I saw a movement. I kept my voice low. Is anyone in there? Silence. Then, after a moment, I heard something clatter. Something heavy landing on wood above and then retreating through the planks. I flicked the lantern and climbed the ladder 2 rungs at a time. Inside wasn't what I expected. The wood was worn smooth in a circle by a sleeping pad, old but clean. A half-empty water bottle sat by a rusted thermos. On the floor lay a rolled-up tarp and a coil of rope. I lifted the pad. No trash, nothing unidentifiable. I stepped to the railing and looked down through night haze. No footprints on the dirt below. It was quiet except for my heartbeat. I called it in. Towers occupied. Evidence of recent stay. Pad, food, light. They said to stow the gear for evidence. I grabbed the bottle and pad and stowed them in my pack. I turned to leave but froze. On the butt of the climbing rope was a handmade notch, 3 tiny cuts forming the letter R. My name. I touched it, stomach lurching. I heard a click like a small metal click behind me. I spun, but the light beam showed nothing but empty space. I backed down the ladder slowly, heart pounding so loud I thought the intruder heard it too. Back at the trailhead, I radioed dispatch. Rangers were on their way. I sat on my truck bumper and tried to calm myself. Through the trees, I saw a faint figure ducking behind a cedar. I flicked my high beam that way, but it disappeared. I got in my truck and locked the doors. I left before backup arrived, too exposed. At the station, I laid out the items: pad, bottle, rope with her carved. The sergeant frowned. He said someone's been living there alone, feeding off creek water, probably watching the valley. I tweaked the footage on my dash cam. No camper, no car, no clues. He said he'd set up an overnight watch and asked me to stay home. I agreed. That night I stayed awake, listening to doors lock and saw the thick trees outside. I couldn't shake the feeling someone was looking in. I didn't turn my back to windows. Next morning, I hiked back up, authorized to clear the tower. The pad was gone, but a new carving had appeared on the rope notch, 2 lines, like an H. I stared at it so long my head throbbed. Then the wind picked up, rustling pine needles overhead, and I remembered, someone's been up there, watching my first days on the job, carving R. H, initials only they know. I couldn't tell if this person was documenting me or marking time. I left one cordless motion sensor at the tower entrance. I also called for cameras and placed one on a nearby tree. Then I walked down, head buzzing. A week later, the camera confirmed movement. Someone up there at 1:13 a.m. No face. Just a tall shadow flicking the lamp on and off. I sat in my patrol truck and stared at the screen until it went dark. They haven't come down yet. I haven't climbed back since I cleared out the pad. But I still watch that tower at night through binoculars. Each blink of that lantern feels like someone testing me, waiting to see what I'll do next. I pulled up to the campsite just after noon. It was the first day off for rangers, but the dispatcher called me earlier. Solo hiker booked 3 days. Didn't check out. No signal since yesterday. I don't usually get calls like that. Campsite's remote, near Maple Creek, about 2 miles of rough track from the ranger station. No one around. The area looked empty from the truck, a single tent, sleeping pad rolled, backpack leaning on a stump. Everything looked neatly packed, staged. I juggled my keys and clipped on my radio, palms stiff. I called dispatch. I'm clear on site. No hiker around. I walked toward the tent. The stake was still in the dirt. No foot traffic. The tent flap was open, zipper pulled to one side. I peered inside, nothing but a sleeping bag, rolled back, pillow flat. No hiker. No welcome mat. It was as if they packed up and left in a hurry. I fished through the bag, socks, toothpaste, journal. No sign they slept. No cooking cup. Even the trash bag was empty, tied up and tossed near a rock. No food packs, no wrappers. I scanned the clearing. I saw faint drag marks behind the tent, long smudges in the leaf litter. I crouched to touch them. They were fresh, edges not crusted over. Something dragged, not boots, maybe gear or even an arm. I radioed dispatch, possible accident. Drag marks behind tent. They replied they'd dispatch medics to Trailhead. I nodded and kept searching. On the stump sat a multi-tool kit and a flashlight, both zipped into a pouch. I smiled, a responsible hiker. But then I reached the gear sling across the pad. A sheath was empty. Knife missing. That didn't sit right with me. I flipped logs near the pad, nothing underneath. No blade. Only the sheath and drag marks. My stomach clenched. I checked the creek nearby. No footprints, no shoe prints in mud, nothing where someone might have walked. Just splashed water and moss. I tried to keep calm even though my pulse was racing. I listened. Nothing but wind in the ferns and a distant bird. No calls for help. I circled back to the tent and noticed the sleeping bag shifted. The top layer was smooth now, tucked in where it hadn't been. Could be wind. Could be something else. I leaned on the edge of the tent, stared at the entrance. If someone took the knife, why leave everything else? Why didn't they pack fully? I pulled my jacket pockets, checked my knife, my radio. I chalked it up to a hiker spooked, maybe packed up late, ditched the blade, ran off into the woods. But then, what dragged? What hurt? I headed to the trailhead, tracking the drag marks. They started 30 feet behind the tent and trailed off into brush. I followed them until the greenery got too thick. I shined my light low to the ground and saw a smear of something dark, no texture, just dark. Not sure blood, maybe oil, but definitely visible. I paused, took a breath. Called dispatch. I'm going to report this. Evidence looks suspicious. They confirmed medics and deputies are en route. I stood at the trail edge while the sun dipped behind trees, scratching on the canopy. I felt eyes on me, but it's always like that when things go sideways in the woods. My hand grazed my sidearm in its holster. An hour later, 2 deputies and a medic arrived at the trailhead. We stepped into the clearing together. I pointed at the drag marks. The medic knelt, scooped up a leaf with a smear and said he'd bag it. Deputies canvassed with flashlights. After a walk, one said he found a bloodied strip of cloth caught on a thorn bush, dark red, thick. Probably from a jacket. I told them I packed my bag. I planned to find the hiker. We spread out but heard nothing. The woods closed in. Night came in waves of cold. We decided to refocus at dawn. That evening, I stayed in a crummy roadside motel near the creek. My radio crackled with updates, K9 units coming at first light. I barely ate and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Every car passing sounded like a hiker stumbling in. I couldn't sleep. Morning came early and gray. Deputies and a K9 tracked away from the campsite. I stayed with the medic to examine the tent one more time. Everything was in place. The knife sheath lay between the tent entrance and the sleeping pad. Medics bagged it. We taped the zipper shut. We hiked out together, the medic and I, while the others tracked north and south. The medic told me the drag marks in cloth were probably from someone seriously hurt. Could be dangerous. I nodded. I thought about someone alive, walking out wearing no knife, bleeding, scared to stay. Or worse. 3 days later, the remains of a man turned up near the creek. He had a deep leg wound but died of exposure. No gear except wallet and registration info, no knife. The coroner said he left the camp, bleeding, leg dragging, and disappeared into distant bush. He tried to walk out. The knife was gone, likely used and dropped. No one else was ever found hiding. They closed the case. I went back once to the campsite and dug a small hole by the pad. I buried the sheath. I sprayed the area with cleansing sage and pine water, something I learned from elders. I stepped back. The clearing seems peaceful now, bird calls, wind, creek, but I still walk at first light. Because someone with a blade, in pain and cold, decided to leave the safety of a campfire to try walking home. And I wonder, what if I'd been there just an hour earlier? We were about 4 miles into the trail when we ran into him. It was mid-September, just past peak season, so the park was quiet. Still some hikers here and there, mostly older folks or couples like us avoiding the summer crowds. Emma and I had taken Friday off to make a long weekend out of it. First time in this park, though we'd done a few in the area before. The trail was narrow but well-marked, winding through thick pine and spruce. Nothing felt weird at first. Birds chirping, little squirrels darting across the path, that constant soft crunch of boots on dry dirt and needles. Emma kept stopping to take pictures, weird fungi, patterns in the bark, stuff like that. We weren't in any hurry. We saw him maybe 2 hours before we planned to set up camp. He stepped out from behind a bend in the trail like he'd been waiting. Tan uniform, white-brimmed hat, radio clipped to his chest. Looked mid-40s, scruffy beard, short hair. Afternoon, he said, giving us a nod. You two staying overnight? We said yeah, just one night. I'm with the Park Service, he said, tapping the badge stitched to his chest. Doing routine checks. Mind if I take a look at your gear? Emma glanced at me. I just kind of shrugged. It didn't seem like a big deal. He wasn't rude or aggressive or anything. But it was different. We've hiked plenty, and never had a ranger stop us like that. Usually, they'll wave if you pass by the station or parking lot, maybe ask where you're headed. But this guy was out on the trail. No truck. No clipboard. Just standing there. What kind of check? I asked. Just making sure you're not carrying anything restricted. Drones, bear attractants, that sort of thing, he said. Then added, and that your food's stored properly. A lot of bear activity lately. He sounded casual enough, but there was something weird about the way he watched us. Like he wasn't just scanning us, but studying. Emma unzipped her pack and showed him our bear canister, some of the cooking gear. I kept my eyes on him while she did. He looked over it all without touching anything, just nodding slowly. Then he stepped closer to my pack. "This yours?" he asked. "Yeah. Mind if I unzip it?" He didn't wait for an answer. He just crouched and started unzipping the front pouch. I didn't say anything, but my stomach felt tight. There wasn't anything in there, just a flashlight, some wipes, a lighter, but the way he handled it felt wrong. Like he was pretending to do a job. He opened each pocket slowly, looked for maybe 3 seconds, then zipped it back up. Didn't say anything. Just stood up and said, "All right, looks good. Stay safe out there. Campsites get real dark after sunset." Then he walked past us, back the way we'd come. No smile, no wave. We didn't really talk for a bit after that. Just kept walking. Emma was the first to say something. "Did that seem off to you?" "Yeah," I said. "A little." She looked back. Why would a ranger be on foot this far out? I didn't know. The whole thing had a weird texture to it, like something was just barely off but not enough to say that guy was definitely not a ranger. We made it to the campsite around 5. There were 3 cleared tent areas in a sort of triangle around a central fire ring. Nobody else was there. Quiet, not even wind. While we set up the tent, I kept glancing toward the trail. Didn't know what I expected to see. Nothing ever came. That night, we ate freeze-dried pasta and sat by the fire for a bit. Still quiet. Unnaturally so. No bugs, no distant owls. Just the crackling of the fire. I couldn't shake the sense that we weren't alone, but I didn't want to freak Emma out. We turned in around 10. Tent zipped. Bear canister stashed away from camp. Sometime after midnight, I woke up. No reason. Just suddenly wide awake. Emma was breathing steady, still asleep. I didn't hear anything at first. But after maybe a minute, I caught something soft. Like leaves shifting under slow feet. Not a branch breaking or anything dramatic. Just movement. Small, careful steps. I held my breath. It stopped. Then, maybe 30 seconds later, another shift. This time to the left of the tent. Close. Like 10 feet away. I didn't move. Just lay there with my eyes open, staring at the nylon above me, waiting to hear it again. Nothing. Just silence. I stayed like that for over an hour. No more sounds. No animals. No bugs. Eventually I drifted off, but it wasn't real sleep. In the morning, Emma said she slept fine. I told her I thought I heard something walking around. She frowned, but didn't say much. We packed up, had a quick breakfast, and started the hike back. About a mile in, Emma stopped and pointed at something off the trail. There was a pile of rocks, like a small cairn, stacked about knee-high just a few feet from the path. That wasn't there yesterday. Did someone build that overnight? She asked. guess so. But there weren't any footprints around it. The ground was soft, and you could see where we'd walked through faint impressions from our boots. The area around the rocks looked untouched. No tread. No drag marks. Maybe it was already there and we just missed it. I offered, even though I knew we hadn't. It was too close to the trail. Too deliberate. We kept going. No other hikers the whole way back. No voices, no distant dogs, nothing. At the trailhead, there was a small ranger station. We figured we'd mention the guy to them just in case it was some kind of training or something new. The woman at the desk was maybe in her 60s. Friendly face. Emma told her about the gear check. The woman's face changed as soon as she heard it. Where exactly did this happen? She asked. I described the bend in the trail, maybe 4 miles in. She looked at the younger guy next to her, another ranger in uniform. He leaned over and asked, "Did he show you ID?" We both shook our heads. "He had a badge stitched on his shirt," Emma said. "But no name tag. No visible ID." The woman stood up. "No one is assigned to that section on foot. Ever. We've had issues before with people impersonating staff." She asked a few more questions, wrote some things down. Told us we should have called it in immediately, but understood we had no service. Said they'd send someone out to check the area. We stayed for another 10 minutes answering questions. Then we left. In the car, I realized something I hadn't thought about earlier. When that guy had gone through our stuff, he hadn't been looking at the gear. He didn't even check our permits. It wasn't about rules. It felt more like he was scanning what we had, what we didn't. Seeing how prepared we were. If anyone would miss us. That night, back home, I laid out my pack again. Nothing was missing. But the side pocket, the one with the emergency GPS, had been zipped differently. The tab was flipped inward, not out like I always leave it. It was a tiny detail, one I might have ignored, but it told me he'd checked it. Maybe even turned it off if he thought it was active. I checked, it was still on. Battery low, but still sending. Maybe that's why nothing happened. Maybe he didn't expect us to have one. We haven't gone back since. I was about 6 weeks into my seasonal contract at the state park when it happened. Nothing fancy, just trail maintenance, mostly. Clearing brush, repainting signs, cleaning up fire pits. It was my 3rd year doing it, so I knew the routines. The hours were decent, and they gave us a bunkhouse near the East Service Gate. The job was chill most of the time. Kind of boring, actually. That morning started like any other. I had a section of trail assigned, a 5-mile loop used by hikers and dog walkers. Not super remote, but it thinned out a lot the deeper you went. Pretty standard brush cleanup. It had rained a couple days earlier, so everything smelled like wet pine and old mud. About 3 miles in, I came across some debris off the side of the trail. From a distance, it looked like someone had dragged some branches together, like a crude lean-to or something. Not unusual, sometimes kids build little shelters, or animals stir things up. But when I got closer, I saw it wasn't random. The branches were laid flat, crisscrossed in a pattern, covering a spot in the ground. Like a lid. It didn't look old. The branches were still green at the ends, like they'd been broken recently. Maybe a day or 2 ago. There were muddy boot prints nearby, and the dirt around the edges was darker, freshly disturbed. I crouched down and poked at it with the handle of my loppers. The branches shifted easily. Underneath, there was a tarp, glue, the kind you get at hardware stores. Folded and tucked in tight, like it was being used to line something. That's when it hit me it was a hole. I stepped back and just stared for a second. It was shallow, maybe 3 feet deep. Rectangular. The size of a person, if I'm being honest. There was a coil of rope inside, thick and tan. Next to it, a bottle of water. Still sealed. And a folded up black hoodie, rolled tight with a rubber band around it. No trash. No wrappers or cans or junk. Just those 4 things. I didn't touch anything else. I stood there for a while, just listening. The woods were dead quiet. No wind, no birds. Just the occasional creak of branches in the distance. I kept glancing behind me without meaning to. Like my brain was trying to catch something my eyes weren't seeing. I took a few photos with my phone, texted my supervisor, and gave him the GPS coordinates. He didn't answer right away, so I radioed base. Told them I found a suspicious pit and asked if someone could come check it out. While I waited, I walked about 20 feet out in each direction. That's when I noticed the path. It wasn't a trail, not officially. Just a narrow line of flattened grass and disturbed soil, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. It led north, deeper into the woods. I followed it for a few yards, maybe 50, and saw cigarette butts. 4 of them, all in a small circle. Stomped out in a way that said someone had stood there for a while. There was no fire ring. No signs of camping. Just those butts, and a low branch with the bark scraped smooth like someone had been leaning on it. Watching something. The trail it pointed toward? That hiking loop I was clearing. My supervisor, Dave, showed up about 20 minutes later in the UTV. Older guy, gruff but fair. He looked in the hole and didn't say anything for a while. Just squatted down and stared at the contents. You touch anything? Nope. Just uncovered it. He nodded. Walked the perimeter. Checked out the cigarettes. Took some notes. We're gonna report this, he said. Could be nothing. But it's too deliberate. He flagged the spot with survey tape and told me to finish the loop and head back after. Said not to mention it to hikers unless I had to. I was on edge the rest of the day. Every squirrel sounded like footsteps. I kept checking behind trees, feeling like something was just out of sight. I told myself it was my imagination. Probably just some weird shelter setup. Maybe a survivalist or someone practicing bushcraft. But I couldn't get over how clean it was. No personal junk. No sign of someone living out there. Just a pit. Hidden. With rope, a tarp, and a bottle of water. That night, back at the bunkhouse, I couldn't sleep. My room was quiet, but every creak in the walls made my stomach twist. Around midnight, I got up and checked my window. Nothing there. Just dark trees and a slice of moonlight. Still, I kept the light on. The next morning, I got called into the main office. A couple sheriff's deputies were there with Dave. They asked me to walk them through everything, where I found it, what I touched, what I saw around the area. I told them about the path, the cigarettes, even the branch with the scraped bark. One of the deputies, younger guy, serious face, asked me, "You see anyone on that trail recently? Anyone off trail, acting odd?" I said no. Just regular hikers. Dog walkers. One guy I remembered because he had this huge camera lens and kept walking into the woods to get shots. That was maybe 2 days before I found the pit. They nodded and wrote that down. Nothing happened for a while after that. I kept doing trail work, but I avoided that section unless I was with someone. Dave quietly rerouted assignments so I wasn't alone out there. I appreciated that. About a week later, we got a call on the ranger radio. A couple had reported a man following them on the north side of the loop, close to where I found the pit. Said he didn't talk to them, just stood off trail and watched. When they called out to him, he turned and walked away. They described him as wearing a dark hoodie and jeans. No backpack. No dog. When the deputies went back out, the pit was filled in. Not by us. Whoever made it had come back. Covered it up. Took the rope and tarp. They found more cigarette butts by that same scraped tree. And a new set of footprints leading away, different tread than before. Lighter. We were told to avoid that area unless in pairs. The park didn't close the trail, but they started quietly rotating more staff through that loop. Unmarked patrols. We weren't supposed to say why. A month later, the season ended and I went home. Nothing else happened while I was there. But I think about it more than I probably should. Whoever made that pit wasn't camping. They weren't playing survival games. They weren't preparing to stay out there. They were waiting for someone else to come by. I was hiking alone, which I know some people don't like to do, but I've always been comfortable with it. Not in a reckless way. I stick to marked trails, carry a GPS, pepper spray, let people know my route, all that. It's something I started doing after college when I needed to clear my head. That weekend was supposed to be like any other. The park was up north, maybe 2 hours from where I live. Not a big one, not a national park, just a state-run forest preserve with a few connected trails and maybe a dozen backcountry campsites. Nothing too remote, but quiet enough that you could go a couple hours without running into anyone. It was late October. I remember because the leaves were all that burnt orange and yellow, and the air had that dry, dusty crunch to it from everything starting to die off. I'd been walking for about 2 hours when I saw a huge old tree off to the left of the trail. It was cracked in half but still partly standing, and I thought it might make a cool photo. The lighting was good, so I stepped off trail just a bit to get a better angle. That was all it took, just that one detour. After I got the photo, I saw a little path that looked like it had been used before. Not marked, not official, but worn down just enough to be a trail. I figured maybe it looped back or went to a clearing or something. I know I shouldn't have followed it, but I wasn't far from the main loop, maybe 200 feet. The path twisted through thicker brush. The trees were denser here, and everything got quieter. Like noticeably quieter. No birds, no wind. Just my boots and the sound of twigs snapping. After maybe 5 minutes, I came to a small clearing. That's where I saw it. A shack. Hand-built. Not a cabin, more like a big box someone had nailed together with scrap wood and metal sheets. It leaned slightly to one side like it had been there a long time, but some of the wood looked newer than the rest. Like someone had been patching it up. I just stood there for a minute, not sure what I was looking at. No windows, just a door. The ground around it was trampled, but not like animals. Shoe prints. I could see the shapes even through the leaves. I probably should have turned around right then, but something about it felt unfinished. Like I needed to know what it was. The door was shut but not locked. I tried the handle and it creaked open. Inside, it smelled like old dirt and mildew. No furniture. Just bare plywood walls, a few rusted tools hung up, and a cot with a gray, thin mattress. No sheets, no pillow. Just used. But what made me freeze were the walls. They were covered in photos. Dozens of them, all pinned with rusted nails and bits of wire. Every photo was of a person, mostly just headshots, some old and faded. A few had names scribbled underneath in red ink. I didn't recognize any of them at first. I just kept staring, thinking it looked like one of those conspiracy theory walls from movies. Only real. Then I saw one photo near the bottom corner. It was me. Not facing the camera. I was walking away, head turned slightly like I just heard something. It was taken from behind, from maybe 20 or 30 feet away. I recognized the shirt I was wearing. It was the same one I had on right then. The background in the photo was woods. These woods. Same time of year, same colors. I didn't move for a long time. My ears were ringing and my stomach dropped out like I'd swallowed ice. My mouth was dry. I looked at the door again, expecting someone to be standing there, but it was still open, empty. I pulled the photo off the wall. My hands were shaking. The back had a date on it. 2 days earlier. That meant someone had followed me. Not just once, twice. They knew I was out here. They watched me. And they were close enough to take a picture without me ever noticing. I looked at the other photos again, slower this time. A lot of them were printed on cheap paper, like off a home printer. Most had that same distant, candid feel. No smiling, no posing. Just people caught in motion. At least 3 I recognized. Not by name, but from news stories, missing hikers, posters at trailheads. A woman in a yellow raincoat from that case last year. A guy with a big camera lens, probably a birdwatcher. The oldest photo was curling at the edges, water damaged. The newest looked crisp. Recent. I backed out of the shack and took off the way I came, but I didn't run. Running felt loud. It felt like it would draw attention. So I walked fast, quiet, stepping carefully, turning my head every few seconds. The path seemed different on the way back. I don't know how to explain it. The light had shifted. Trees looked closer together. I almost missed the gap where I'd left the main trail. When I got back to the marked path, I didn't stop. I hiked the rest of the loop without pausing for water or rest. I didn't look behind me until I hit the trailhead and saw the parking lot. My car was the only one there. I got in, locked the doors, and just sat there for a while, trying to process. I still had the photo in my jacket pocket. At the ranger station, I told the guy behind the desk what I found. He looked skeptical until I handed him the photo. Then he made a call and told me to wait. 2 officers showed up 20 minutes later. I told them everything. Showed them the GPS location I'd marked. They asked a lot of questions, especially about how far off trail I'd gone. I could tell they were trying to be polite, but also trying to figure out if I was making it up or got turned around. I wasn't. They sent someone out that afternoon to check. Later that night, I got a call from one of the officers. He said they found the clearing, but the shack was gone. Like, completely gone. No walls, no cot, nothing. Just disturbed soil, like something heavy had been dragged away. The weirdest part? They found 2 deep boot prints near where the shack had been. Fresh. Pointing toward the trail. They asked if I had the photo. I did, and I turned it in. Never got it back. I haven't hiked alone since. I was about halfway through the season when it happened. Just a basic patrol shift, nothing special. I work as a ranger for a medium-sized state park, woods, trails, some lakes, maybe 20 backcountry campsites, but most of the park's just deep forest. No cell signal in about 80% of it. You learn to carry a radio and extra batteries, and you always log your location before heading out. It was mid-October, already cold at night. I'd been assigned to do a sweep of the western fire line area, less traffic part of the park, mostly to make sure no one was camping in the restricted zones. People don't always read the signs, or they ignore them. We usually find a few illegal fire rings or hammocks every season. I was alone that day. Pretty standard. My radio was good, GPS clipped on, and I had the park truck parked at the fire access road, about 3 miles from where I was walking. I headed out around noon, planning to make a loop and be back to the truck by 4. Around 2, I came across a tent. Bright orange, newer looking, maybe a 2-person size. It was set up about 150 feet off the main trail, tucked behind some brush. Not hidden well, just far enough that someone would have had to intentionally go off trail to put it there. We have signs everywhere that say no camping past marker 17. This tent was way past it. I called it in over the radio and snapped a few photos. No response from the radio, but that's not unusual that deep in the woods. I approached the tent, announced myself, standard procedure in case someone was inside. No answer. The flap was zipped shut, and I didn't hear anything. I stood there for a few seconds. Everything was dead silent, no birds, no wind, not even distant rustling. Just stillness. I called out again. Nothing. I tapped the side of the tent. No movement. I figured they were out hiking and I'd just leave a notice or, worst case, come back the next morning with another ranger. Then I noticed something odd. No gear outside. No fire ring. No packs or shoes or food bags. Most people, even rule breakers, leave something outside the tent. But this was totally clean. Like it was set up for show. I didn't unzip it. It didn't feel right, and we're not really supposed to go through people's stuff unless there's an obvious emergency or danger. I hung the citation slip on the zipper, logged the coordinates, and marked the closest trail intersection so I could find it again. Then I headed back. I felt off the rest of the hike. I kept looking behind me. Not because I saw anything, just that heavy, static kind of feeling. The woods were too quiet. When I got back to the truck, I tried the radio again. Got through this time. Told dispatch I'd found an illegal camp setup and was heading back in the next morning with someone else to follow up. Next morning, I went out with Mike, another ranger, mid-50s, solid guy. We left the station around 9 a.m., got to the same access road by 9:45. We had the coordinates, so we cut into the brush straight toward where the tent had been. It wasn't there. We walked the area twice. Same trees, same brush. Same trampled patch of grass where it had been sitting, clear as day. But no tent. No trash, no gear, no leftover rope or stakes. I pulled on my phone and showed Mike the photos from the day before. He looked at them, looked at the ground again. Well, someone moved fast. We started checking the area for signs of which way they went. That's when we saw the prints. They weren't where we expected. Not leading back toward the trail or deeper into the woods. They were heading back toward the fire access road. We followed them. The ground was soft in places, pine needles, wet soil, so the tracks were clear enough. 2 different sets, one larger, one smaller. Both in boots. No dog prints, no bike treads. They led straight to where I parked my truck the day before. Then they stopped. Not near the truck. To it. The prints went right up to the driver's side door. We both stood there staring at them. One of the boots had a distinct tread pattern, diagonal slashes across the sole. I hadn't noticed that the day before. We circled the truck. No damage, no broken windows. but Mike pointed at the dirt along the edge of the door. A smudge, like a gloved hand, had rested there, and below it, scrape marks on the paint. Thin, short, in a downward arc. I opened the door. Nothing looked out of place. Glove box closed. Seat normal. Keys were on me the whole time yesterday. I checked the back, under the seats. All clean. But I noticed something small wedged between the driver's seat and the center console. A paper scrap. Torn at the edge. I pulled it out. It was a photo. Printed on glossy paper, kind of cheap, like a home printer. The photo showed the front of the ranger station, the one I work at. The shot was taken from inside a car, like through a windshield. You could see part of the dashboard in the frame. It wasn't my truck. The angle made it clear someone had been parked, watching the front entrance. It wasn't dated. No markings. Just that photo. We took it back to the station and filed a report. The sheriff's office came out and took a statement. Nothing came of it. No one found camping illegally. No suspects. No vehicles reported in that area. The only camera on the station entrance is motion triggered, and we checked the logs. Nothing unusual. But that doesn't cover the parking lot or road. I started driving my personal car for a few weeks after that. I don't leave it parked out at the fire roads anymore unless I absolutely have to. And I don't check tents alone. Ask ChatGPT. We got the call around 2:30 in the morning. I was just finishing my shift notes when dispatch radioed. Male voice, breathless, said he was injured and alone near Copper Ridge, no other details. The line dropped before they could get much else, but we had GPS coordinates. The system logged his ping at a clearing maybe 7 miles in, off a branch trail not on any current maps. That kind of call isn't exactly unusual. People twist ankles, fall on wet rocks, get lost and panic. Happens every other week, especially in spring when the weather's good but the trails are still muddy. I was paired with Eric that night. Solid guy, ex-army medic, not a lot of conversation but sharp as hell. We loaded up with the usual medical kit, stretcher rig, flares, radios, and headed out in the UTV. The road got too rough after 4 miles, so we hiked the last 3 on foot. It was dark as hell. No moon. Just our headlamps and the occasional reflector on trail markers. The woods out there are dense, thick old-growth pines, moss so deep it swallows your footsteps. Everything smelled wet and cold. The GPS led us off trail around mile 7. We found a narrow, winding path. No markings, but it looked recently used. Like someone had been through there a day or two before, branches bent, boot prints in the mud, that kind of thing. We followed it for maybe a quarter mile before we saw the glow. A fire. Still burning low in a small pit, with fresh logs blackened at the edges. Someone had been here within the hour. But no one was there. Just the fire, a rolled-out sleeping bag, and a camera on a small tripod pointed at the trail. We called out. Loud. Multiple times. I circled the clearing while Eric checked the immediate area. Nothing. No blood, no torn clothes, no sign of injury. Just that low crackle of the fire and the smell of wood smoke. I looked at the sleeping bag. It was zipped open. Not messy, not thrown off, just open. Like someone had gotten up and walked away. No bag, no gear, no food, not even a flashlight left behind. I walked over to the camera. It was one of those cheap handheld ones, scratched up. Still on. Red light blinking. I hit playback. The last clip was only a couple minutes long. Just one continuous shot. It was us. Me and Eric. Walking into the clearing. You could see the glow of our headlamps moving through the trees before we appeared in frame. The recording stopped a few seconds after we stepped into view. I didn't say anything right away. Just turned the screen toward Eric. He watched it, then looked over at the fire. "This was still recording when we arrived," he said, voice low. I nodded. The timestamp on the video said 3:14 a.m. It was 3:26. "Someone was here," I said. "They saw us coming." He looked at the trail behind us. Or waited for us. We did a sweep of the area. Radioed back to dispatch and gave an update. No victim found, no signs of injury. They asked us to hold position and wait for daylight so we could do a broader grid search. So we stayed. Eric kept eyes on the woods while I sat near the fire, letting the warmth creep back into my fingers. I replayed the clip a few more times, watching the moment our headlamps broke the edge of the trees. Every time I watched, it made my skin crawl more. Because whoever had set up that camera, they knew exactly where to aim it. The tripod was fixed on the only gap in the tree line that led to the trail. Like they were waiting for someone. And they hit record just before we arrived. Not 5 minutes before. Not an hour. Right before. We took turns staying awake. The sun came up slow, filtered through gray clouds. Everything looked flat and colorless in the light. We did a grid search starting at dawn. Nothing. No tracks leading away, no dragging marks, no second set of prints past where we come in. The only set of boot prints heading out from the fire pit were ours. We flagged the site, packed out the gear, and hiked back to the UTV. The camera came with us. We logged everything, filed the footage, turned it over to the sheriff's office. They brought in dogs later that day. Nothing turned up. The call was labeled unresolved. I don't have theories. Not really. All I know is someone set up that camp. Someone built the fire. Someone placed the camera, hit record, and walked away if they walked at all. And they knew exactly when we were coming. I worked trails and public safety for a state park in the Northwest for a little over 4 years. Nothing too rugged, just dense forest, a few backcountry loops, and some short, steep scrambles around the lake. Mostly hikers, some overnighters, and a handful of serious campers who came through with all the gear strapped to their backs like turtles. It was a quiet job, for the most part. A lot of trash pickup and reminding people to leash their dogs. That summer had been unusually busy. More people than usual out on the trails, probably because of all the pandemic stuff finally lifting. Everyone was trying to reconnect with nature. Most of them weren't prepared for it. We had to send SAR out for twisted ankles, heat stroke, even a guy who ran out of water just 4 miles in. That's typical, though. You get used to that. But what started happening in late July wasn't that. It started with one report. A woman hiking solo said a guy stopped her on a narrow section near the West Ridge and asked her if she was alone. That was the first thing she told us. Not a hello or how was the trail, he just came out of the brush and said, "Are you alone?" She told him she was meeting friends and walked off, but she said he followed her for a bit, maybe 50 feet behind. She kept looking back and he'd stop whenever she did. After a while she jogged down the trail until she caught up with another couple. He disappeared after that. We filed it. Made a note to sweep that section more often. But weird interactions happen. It's public land. 3 days later, we got a second report. A guy, mid-30s, came to the station and said someone had asked him what kind of car he drove. This was on the Upper Falls Loop, pretty far from where the first report was. The man said the guy didn't seem threatening at first, just off. The way he said things didn't quite line up. He said the guy asked if he parked at the main lot or the south pull-off. When he said the pull-off, the guy kind of smiled and nodded like he already knew, then walked away without another word. We checked the parking area after that, just to be sure. Nothing seemed touched. Then 2 more reports came in within a week. Both women, both hiking alone. One said the guy asked if she had a whistle or any kind of alarm thing. The other said he asked if she knew what time the sun set that day. Both said he stared way too long when they gave vague answers and that he didn't seem to be carrying any hiking gear. Just a small backpack and binoculars. That was the detail that stuck out. Every single one of them, 4 people, all on different trails, mentioned binoculars. We don't usually get creeps like that in the park. The bigger parks, maybe, or the ones closer to cities, but ours was out of the way. Mostly locals, some tourists in the summer. Not the kind of place where people expect that kind of stuff. We started doing double patrols, plainclothes and uniformed. I got paired up with Mike for most of it. He's been doing this job longer than I have, former cop, quiet guy. He doesn't talk much unless something needs to be said. The plan was simple: cover more ground, talk to hikers, watch for the binoculars. We didn't spot him until early August. Mike and I were posted in a narrow bend on the summit trail, just past mile marker 6. It's shaded there, easy to hide in. We weren't hiding, exactly, just blending in. Sitting on a log, drinking water, acting like a break spot. A few groups passed by, no issues. Then we saw him. He came up the trail alone, not hiking so much as drifting. Walking slow, like he was stalling. He had a green backpack too small for real hiking and a set of black binoculars slung over his shoulder. He didn't see us right away. He was watching a woman who was about 100 feet ahead of him, walking alone. When he noticed us, he flinched a little, like he hadn't expected anyone else there. Then he smiled and gave a small wave, like we were just random hikers. We stood up. Mike approached him first, casual voice. "How's the trail treating you?" The guy didn't answer at first. He just sort of shrugged. "It's quiet," he said. "Nice when it's quiet." Mike asked him if he was with anyone. The guy said no, but acted like the question was weird. "Just walking," he said. "Is that okay?" I asked what kind of gear he had, if he was camping. He said no, just looking around. I asked to see his ID. That's when things changed. He didn't argue, didn't refuse. Just froze for a second like he was doing math in his head. Then he slowly pulled off his pack and handed it to me. "It's in there," he said. It wasn't. Inside the pack were 3 ID cards, none of them his. 2 women and 1 man. All missing the same corner. Like they'd been cut. There were also zip ties. A full bundle of them, the thick black kind you use on heavy cable. Folded up in a side pouch like they were part of a toolkit. Next to them was a folded paper map of the park with several points circled in pen, one of which was the overlook right above where we were standing. And then the binoculars. High quality, military looking. The lenses were smeared with fingerprints and dirt. Like they'd been used a lot, quickly. Mike stepped aside to radio it in. The guy just stood there, completely still, not even pretending to act confused or innocent. I remember the details so clearly, how calm he was. Like none of this surprised him. Like we just caught him 5 minutes too early. When the deputies arrived, he didn't say a word. Not during the arrest, not in the car, not even when they read him his rights. Just kept that same blank look. Later, we found out none of the IDs belonged to locals. One was flagged as stolen from a woman 3 counties over. Another was for a guy reported missing the year before in a park 3 hours south. No one could figure out why he had them or how he got them. The investigation went on for weeks. No charges stuck right away because technically he hadn't done anything yet. Possession of stolen ID, maybe. Trespassing. But nothing that matched what we thought he was doing. Still, after that, the sightings stopped. No more reports. No more binoculars. That part of the park got a lot quieter. I don't know what he was planning, but I think we stopped him before he got to do it. And I think if we'd waited even a few more days, we would have found something a lot worse than just zip ties. I pulled in just past sunset, trail dust all over the truck, boots still muddy, thinking about settling in for the night. My shift was supposed to be quiet, just a regular patrol loop, check the creek crossings, radio in at the usual times, then head back to the little ranger cabin up here. It's remote, mile deep in the forest, no cell, just the radio repeater on the ridge. The cabin's old pine, 2 rooms and a small loft. I usually keep it unlocked when I'm in, but I'd locked it before heading out that morning, didn't want raccoons rummaging in my food. It felt wrong when I got out of the truck and saw the door latched from the inside. No one else was assigned here. Only I had keys, and only I go in. So seeing the latch hanging shut made my gut cringe. I knocked and called, "Hey, I'm back." My voice sounded too loud in the silence that followed. Nothing. I pressed my ear to the door. I heard my own breathing, the creak of an undersized cabin, wind through the chinking. No footsteps. No radio crackle. No hint of someone inside. The door wouldn't budge. I grabbed the latch and yanked, it stayed locked. Took out my pocket knife, pinned the latch, twisted it while pulling. The wooden door squealed. I pushed through. Smashed into the cabin like I'd broken something. Empty. My boots crunched on the floor, no one there. The stove cold, no pot waiting for supper. I flicked the light. Nothing but my lantern glow and some loner haze in the windows. I ran through both rooms. Nothing. I checked the loft, nothing. Then I noticed later my food was gone. All of it. Normally I'd spread the stuff out on the table to air when I got back. Chips in the corner, oatmeal, 2 cans of stew. Now I saw empty wrappers shoved under the table, a crumpled aluminum can rolled into a corner. And on the floor, a bath towel, wet, dark, half-soaked. Not mine. I kept one towel, green terry. This was white, thin, and soaked to the floorboards. It must have come in handy. I started feeling like I was being watched, like someone had left it here just to rub it in, to show they'd been here. I ran to the radio, hit transmit. STN Alpha to base, this is Ranger Cole. I need every unit in the area, metals, all available. I got a break-in at STN Alpha, but no sign of intruder. Over. Nothing. Just static. The antenna's short here. If it's windy, you lose it. And tonight it was silent woods. I clicked the button again. Listened. Nothing. That silence felt heavy, like the forest was waiting. I checked my watch. 8:15. I'd been gone since 6 that morning. Weird someone would wait 8 hours just to lock the cabin from inside then vanish. I backed out to the porch. Took the towel with me, wrapped it tight in a trash bag. I stomped back in, wiped the floorboards along the door. That night stretched forever. I ate peanuts from the glove box and sat in the dark. Stove on low, just enough light to see the towel on the table, damp and unwelcome. Every pine limb tapping on the roof sounded like a footstep. Every distant owl felt closer. The door stayed locked behind me. I didn't sleep. I sat and listened until the moon started to fade. Then, right before dawn, the radio crackled. Alpha, this is base. You had some comms interference last night. We heard you faint at 8:16. Units south of you reported hearing your name called. Do you copy? I exhaled so hard I felt it in my ears. I copy, I said. I'm fine. Just securing the cabin. Can I get relief? They promised a team to sweep in by noon. I sat until daylight and walked out the 15 minutes to the gravel road. When the support arrived, they took the bag with the towel, snapped pics of the floor, dusted for prints. I rode out with them and let them lock the cabin back up. Days later, nothing turned up. No prints, no DNA. No sign of footpath or drag marks around the tower. The towel tested clean, no hair, no sweat. No one's missing. All my food packaging came back clean of fingerprints. But how'd they get in and why lock it? I never went back alone. I leave the cabin unlocked now. I carry pepper spray even when I don't need it. I still can't explain why someone locked the cabin from the inside, left just before I got back, and dropped the used towel on the floor. Maybe they wanted me to feel that someone was in there. Maybe they just wanted to mess with my head. I don't sleep there anymore. It started off as a normal camping trip, nothing special. I'd been hiking solo for a few days in this backcountry spot deep in the national forest, no cell service, just me and my gear. The spot I picked was pretty remote, a little clearing surrounded by thick pines and firs, perfect for pitching my tent. I was far enough off the main trail that I figured I wouldn't get bothered. The first night went fine. I was tired from the hike, so I passed out early and slept like a rock. But the second night was when things started to get weird. Around 3 a.m., I woke up because something didn't feel right. At first, it was just that uneasy, can't quite put your finger on it feeling. Like the kind you get when you're out in the woods and the usual night noises go quiet for a second. I lay there, trying to listen, and then I saw a flashlight beam moving through the trees about 50 yards from my tent. It wasn't steady. It bobbed up and down like whoever was holding it was walking, but slow, almost like they were sneaking. It moved closer, heading straight for my campsite. I froze. The beam stopped right at the edge of the clearing, just shy of where my tent was set up. And it didn't move anymore. I didn't make a sound, didn't even breathe loud. I was just lying there, watching this single beam of light slice through the dark, the only thing moving in the still forest. Minutes passed, maybe longer. I didn't know what to do. I thought about yelling or making noise, but something about this made me think the best thing was to stay quiet and not give away that I was awake. The beam just stayed there, focused right on my tent, unmoving. I could barely hear my own heart beating. The air felt heavy, like the whole forest was holding its breath. Every now and then, a branch would crack somewhere else in the woods, but that light never wavered or shifted. It just stared at me, or at least at where I was. Eventually, dawn started breaking. The woods got a bit lighter, and I could finally see past the trees. The flashlight was gone. No sign of whoever had been holding it. I packed up as fast as I could and hiked back to the main trail, not looking back once. I told the rangers when I got out, but they said there was no record of any other campers or patrols in that part of the forest that night. No one else should have been out there. But I know what I saw. Someone was watching me all night from the edge of the trees, just standing there in the dark. I left my pack leaning against a fallen pine, wiped sweat off my neck, and snapped a pic of the creek. I was on day 3 of a solo trek, testing some new boots, and feeling good, tired, but good. The trail had been quiet, a jay squawk in the morning, leaves crunching underfoot, wind rattling needles overhead. Nothing else. Not a soul for miles. I'd planned 8 miles that day, but I cut it short around noon when I spotted a flat spot by the water. I set up camp, boiled water, ate a granola bar. At first, everything was routine. I checked my GPS, no blips of signal. As usual, unzipped the tent, crawled in for a nap. The forest was still. Even the creek sounded distant, like a radio turned down low. When I woke, the sky was bruised pink. I grabbed my headlamp and wandered down to the bank to rinse dishes. That's when I heard the rustle. Soft at first, like a squirrel in the brush. Then louder, like someone shifting weight on the stones behind me. I froze, spoon in hand, and listened. Nothing. I turned slowly. Empty trees. I shrugged it off, probably my mind playing tricks, and walked back. The tent zipper squeaked a little too loud in the silence. I stashed the spoon, zipped myself inside, and lay flat, watching the fabric walls glow orange where the setting sun hit them. I didn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I woke cold. The temperature had dropped faster than I expected. I poked my head out and saw the creek under moonlight. That's when I noticed the footprints. Fresh boot prints pressed in the soft mud, leading from the tree line to my camp and back. 2 sets, one big, one small. Mine only matched the big ones. The other were narrower, deeper. I crouched, heart thudding, and traced them with a fingertip. No chance they were old, still soft edges. Whoever came through had stopped a few feet from where my pack was. I stared at the prints until my eyes hurt, then zipped up and sat against the tent wall, chest tight, listening to the forest settle into the night. Morning came slow, gray and overcast. I packed faster than I ever had. That extra set of prints stayed at the back of my mind, but I convinced myself I'd scared off a deer or someone else camping off trail. I hit the trail before sunrise and hiked 8 miles out without stopping. Didn't take a single photo. When I got back to my truck, I realized I left my camera, my DSLR, on that picnic stump near the creek. Panic hit like a punch in the gut. I called the ranger station on my cell and they told me to come back at first light with a deputy. I drove back at 6, parked, grabbed my boots, and followed the same path. The creek was quiet again. I spotted my camera lens poking from under pine needles. I picked it up, dusted it off. The screen was cracked, but it powered on. The SD card was still inside. That night I plugged it into my laptop and scrolled through the shots, leaves and water, me at the stream, then nothing for hours, and then around 1:47 a.m. a new photo. Me, sitting on my pack, headlamp off, flashlight beam shining on someone standing a few feet to my left. I was smiling, leaning forward like I just told a joke. Next to me was a man in full camouflage, jacket, pants, baseball cap. Face shadowed, but I could see his profile. He wasn't grinning. Just standing tall, hands at his sides, looking at me. That photo was the only shot of him. No earlier frames, no later ones. Like he appeared for that moment, camera caught me laughing, then he slipped away. My hands shook. I stared at his dark shape, wondering how long he'd been there before I napped. wondering why he smiled only in that one frame. Later, I realized I was smiling at relief. I thought he might help me, show me I wasn't alone. Instead, he was spying. I called the station again, told them about the prints and the photo. They sent a deputy out that afternoon. We retraced my steps to the creek. The prints had washed out, but brush was bent where my tent had been. No sign of a man. We checked surrounding campsites, quizzed a few hikers who'd come through. I was the only overnight that stretch. The deputy asked if I'd recognize him. I said yeah, that silhouette was burned in my mind. He took the SD card and said they'd run it through evidence. I left before sunset, driving home in a daze. A week later I got a call. They found a guy matching the description squatting in an old hunting cabin 2 valleys over. They arrested him for trespassing on forest land. His pack had zip ties, a spare map of my route, and a camera with an empty SD card except for one photo. Me, smiling, flashlight off and headlamp on, the forest dark behind me. Same timestamp. They never charged him with anything harsher, no proof he intended harm. He claimed he'd been lost, wanted to see a real camper, figured I'd help him. They found no missing persons. Just that cabin, filled with gear, binoculars, rope, even a few ID cards that weren't his. They called it weird, but couldn't pin down a crime. I don't go back. Sometimes I wake in the night, hearing snapping twigs, and I swear I can see camo beyond the trees. I packed up the lens, but I keep the photo on my phone. I look at it and force myself to remember. The smile was relief, not joy. I leaned in, thinking I'd found a friend in the dark. Instead, I found a watcher. And I was lucky I didn't stay to say hello. I was sitting in the patrol truck just after midnight, staring at the radio, trying to keep myself awake. It had been a slow shift, nothing but the usual creek crossings and busted campfires, and I was halfway through an energy drink when the static crackled louder than usual. "This is Ranger Holt. Do you copy?" The voice was calm, like he'd called in maybe 5 minutes ago for a routine check. Only Ranger Holt had been missing for 3 years. I saw his face on every missing person flyer in the station. My heart jumped. I hit the mic. "This is Ranger Myers. I copy you. Where are you?" I kept my voice steady even though my fingers trembled on the wheel. Coordinates 42.3167 minus 110.8432. Please advise. The line dropped back into static. I blinked, looked at the map on my phone. No trail, no lake, nothing. That spot was 3 miles east of the boundary, deep in brush with no marked paths. I checked the radio again. Nothing. Whoever was up there didn't sound panicked, just asking for help. I gunned the truck and headed east on the gravel road toward the old service gate. My radio stayed silent. My flashlight bounced around in the cab as I drove faster, heart slamming. When I parked, the night was too quiet. The crickets weren't chirping, and even the pines seemed still. I loaded my pack with a first aid kit, water, a spare radio battery, and stepped into the woods. The moon was a sliver but enough to cast pale shapes. I followed my GPS to the coordinates, bushwhacking through willows and deadfall. Somewhere around 50 minutes in, the forest opened onto a small clearing. There was nothing there, no cabin, no tent, no footprints. Just overturned stones and leaf litter. I snapped on the radio. "Holt? Ranger Holt, do you read?" My voice sounded small. Then my radio clicked. "I'm here," his voice quiet. "Behind you." I spun around. Trees closed in on me. I lifted the radio mic. "Where exactly?" "5 paces south." behind the cedar. I counted 5 steps before I hit the trunk. It was wide, old bark cracked. Behind it, a small depression in the ground, like a makeshift seat. No sign of a body, no gear. "Can you stand up?" I asked. "Give me a second." His voice sounded weaker than I remembered. He didn't say please or sound excited, just calm, resigned. I circled the tree. That's when I saw the edge of a bright orange jacket snagged on a low branch. I lunged forward, grabbed the sleeve. There was a figure crouched behind a log, skin pale, ribs showing through his shirt, eyes half closed. I dropped my pack, got down beside him. "Ted?" "Oh man, Ted." I pulled my radio mic aside. "He's here, he's alive." He didn't respond right away. Then he whispered, "Thanks for coming." I wrapped him in my jacket and eased him to his feet. His legs shook like he hadn't stood in days. I leaned him on my shoulder while I hauled out the first aid kit. He had scrapes along his arms, and his lips were cracked. No broken bones. "Tell me what happened," I said, helping him sip water. He blinked, then nodded once. "Truck broke down. I tried to hike back. Got lost. I found this spot. I called every hour." "How did you get the radio?" I asked. He closed his eyes. "I found the old stash. The one by the service gate. There was an extra set of batteries. I kept it charged." I loaded him into my pack frame, strapped his arms around my neck, and started for the truck. Every crackle of underbrush made me jump. I half expected someone else to appear, but it was just the woods. On the way out, he didn't say much. Just stared at the trees, eyes unfocused. When we reached the trail, I called dispatch and told them I had Ranger Holt. Yeah, that Ranger Holt. By the time we got to the station, the sun was rising. He walked inside shaky, 2 deputies there waiting. He hugged me, whispered, "I'm sorry." I didn't ask why he'd disappeared. Didn't ask why he never made it out on his own. He was safe. That was enough. They put him in a chair, gave him food, clean clothes, and I went outside for air. I looked back at the wood line, expecting to see someone watching. But there was nobody. 3 years gone. 24 hours found. He never spoke of anyone else, no hunters, no campers, no pursuers. Just him, the broken truck, and the forest. And somehow, that was more terrifying than any ghost story ever could be. I set up camp in that clearing just off the Greenwood Trail, maybe a quarter mile from the nearest signed path. I hiked in that morning easy 6 miles with a pack full of gear and food for 3 nights. When I picked the spot, it seemed perfect, flat ground, waist-high grass around the edges, a small dip for the fire ring. No other campers anywhere close. That first night was quiet. I'd cooked pasta, drank a beer, then zipped into my sleeping bag around 10. The wind picked up after midnight, rattled the tent fabric, but I wasn't worried. Trees swayed, branches tapped. I woke a couple times, checked my phone clock at 2:15, then 3:40, nothing strange, just the usual forest noises. When morning came, light filtered through the mesh ceiling. I unzipped the flap, poked my head out, and froze at the first thing I saw, footprints. Big ones, maybe size 11 or 12, clear in the dewy grass. They circled my tent twice, right up to the vestibule. No small prints, just those. I counted at least 16 steps in total. I sat up, heart pounding, ears straining for any sign of movement. The grass around the prints was still wet, but no other tracks led to or away from my tent, just those circles. Whoever did this walked all around me in the dark, close enough I'd heard breathing if I hadn't been snug inside the bag. I grabbed my flashlight and shone the beam into the grass. No gear, no dropped items, nothing. The prints faded after 10 feet in every direction, like they stopped just beyond the edge of my camp. I felt exposed, naked in the clearing. I texted the ranger station, no service, just the SOS only icon. I left my message anyway, found footprints circling my tent last night. No one here now. Unsafe. Then I packed up quickly, left the tent and most of my gear behind, and jogged back to the main trail. An hour later I reached the ranger station, out of breath. The windows were dark, but the door was unlocked. I found Ranger Kim in her office at a desk covered with maps and paperwork. "Hey," I panted. "I found footprints. They circled my tent overnight. No idea who. Can you come look?" She grabbed her radio and gear. "Show me," she said. "Let's move." Didn't ask questions, just swung her pack on and led me back down the trail. We hiked in under overcast skies. The forest felt unnaturally quiet, no birds, no wind through the canopy. Even the crickets were silent. I followed Kim's tall frame until I got that first glimpse of the clearing again. The prints were still there, faint in the wet grass. I pointed them out while Kim knelt and took photos. Then she sat back on her heels, eyes scanning the tree line. "Something else," she said, pointing about 100 yards northeast. "See that?" Through her binoculars I made out a rustle, then a dark shape crouching among the ferns. It didn't move like a deer or a raccoon. It was static, blending in like a stump covered in leaves. Kim stood and swung her flashlight beam onto the spot. The shape shifted, slow, deliberate, then hunched forward and dropped out of sight. She clicked the radio. "Station, this is Kim. I've got someone in camouflage, possibly hunting people at Grid Z4. Send backup, please." I swallowed hard. My legs shook. Kim crouched and we crept toward the spot, keeping low. The grass was damp, bending her pant legs. Every snap of a twig sounded like a gunshot in the quiet. When we got within 40 feet, Kim paused and whispered, "Stay here." She moved left, circled behind a clump of saplings. I peered through binoculars and saw it then, a full ghillie suit, branches and moss woven into burlap strips, someone wrapped head to toe in camouflage. A rifle stock rested against their shoulder, scope aimed though I couldn't see what through. My throat went dry. I felt sick imagining his finger on the trigger, watching for a target. Kim radioed again, subject armed and camouflaged, then the bushes rattled. The figure jerked upright and ran. They melted through the trees uphill, moving fast. Kim dropped her pack, grabbed her sidearm, and fired a warning shot into the air. The report echoed, and I damn near jumped out of my skin. They didn't stop. Just vanished into the forest like a ghost. Kim cursed under her breath, then knelt beside me. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, too shocked to speak. She didn't waste a second. "Help me carry your gear back," she said. "We're out of here." We hauled our packs, mine and her abandoned radio, and hustled back to the trail. Every shadow sent my heart racing. Every distant deer alarmed cry sounded like pursuit. When we reached the gravel road, 2 deputies were parked with their trucks idling. They ran up, gear at the ready. Kim gave them a quick debrief. They promised to grid search the area at first light with dogs and more rangers. I watched them speed off, headlights cutting swaths in the dark. The forest swallowed the road once the trucks turned out of sight. Kim looked at me and said, "You good to go?" Her voice was calm but firm. I nodded, voice tight. Yeah, let's go. I piled into my truck, hands still trembling on the wheel. Kim followed me back to the station. I signed a report, gave them every detail, the footprints, the empty clearing, the ghillie suit moving like a living brush pile. They called it attempted stalking, trespass, firearms violation. The deputies said they'd find him or at least scare him out of the park. I never went back out there. I spent the rest of my trip in a nearby motel, lights on, doors locked. I kept replaying the way that suit moved, like he was part of the forest. Like he'd been studying me for nights. The boots that circled my tent? Probably his. I got lucky. I made it out. The next day I drove home under a sun I barely noticed. I stayed off trails for a while, then stuck to day hikes with a friend. The woods weren't the same after that. Every snap of a twig set my heart racing. Every shadow looked like burlap and moss. He never showed up again. Maybe he left. Maybe he moved on. But I saw headlines later, someone arrested 50 miles south wearing a ghillie suit and a stolen rifle. Charged with stalking hikers. I don't know if that was him, but I like to think they caught the guy who walked circles around my tent in the night. I kept my camera on my nightstand for weeks after, just so I could scroll through the pics and remind myself I'd been right. The prints, the path, the empty camp. And that shape in the bushes, last thing I saw before I ran. I was doing my usual midday patrol when I spotted it, a little mound of fresh soil at the edge of the Oak Ridge Trail. We've walked that stretch 100 times, checking for collapsed banks or trail erosion. Never seen dirt piled up like that. It looked like someone had dug a hole and just tossed the earth back, crookedly. I parked my truck 20 yards away, unlatched my pack, and grabbed a trowel. The woods were quiet. No birds calling, no wind rattling the leaves. Even the squirrels stayed still. I knelt by the mound and felt the edge. It was soft, damp. Whoever dug it used a small shovel, not animal claws. I started scooping. At first, it was just roots and clay, but then I hit something firm, a strap. Leather, faded. I lifted more dirt and saw a backpack, crusted with mud. I froze for a second, half expecting a hiker to pop out yelling surprise, but of course no one did. I called it in on the radio. Base, this is Ranger Lee. I found a backpack buried off the Oak Ridge Trail, coordinates 372. Requesting backup. My voice sounded normal, but my heart was thudding. I dug around the zipper until I could flip it open. Inside were stacks of cash and rubber bands, IDs in plastic sleeves, and folded clothing. The money was old, some bills were yellowed, and the IDs weren't mine. I flipped through. A woman from Timber Falls, missing since last spring. A college kid out of Cedar Hollow, never found after a weekend hike. A man from 2 counties over, gone almost a year. My skin crawled. I sat back on my heels and scanned the woods. The sun was dropping behind the pines, and the shadows stretched long. I felt like someone was watching, but all I saw were trees. My radio crackled. Lee, this is base. Back up en route, ETA 10 minutes. I exhaled without meaning to. 10 minutes felt like an hour. I poked at the pile of clothes. A knitted scarf I recognized from the Cedar Hollow case, a bright red stripe down gray wool. It was folded neatly on top. Whoever put this here took care not to damage anything. Or maybe they knew exactly what they were hiding and wanted it to stay hidden. Down the trail, I heard a snap. Probably a branch under a deer's hoof. My head snapped toward it. Nothing moved. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, and I saw a faint track leading off trail, crisscross grass, too narrow for a boot but enough to mark a path. I followed it 30 feet and found scuffed up earth where someone had crouched. Pine needles pressed flat into the dirt, like a makeshift seat. My stomach twisted. I backed away, heart racing. Get to the pack, cover the scene. But I felt exposed, a sitting duck by a fresh grave. I stomped back to the mound, kicked at the dirt. The backpack lay open. I grabbed the IDs and tucked them in my vest pocket, then stuffed the clothes into my pack. The cash I left out of curiosity, probably important evidence. By then, the sky was Bruce purple. The woods had that hush that comes just before dusk. I glanced uphill, nothing but trunks in perfect vertical lines. But I knew I wasn't alone. 10 minutes later, Deputy Harris and Ranger Kim trudged in, packs already on. Kim tapped her watch. "Lee, what V you got?" Her tone was tight. I pointed down. Harris knelt, snapped photos, bagged the backpack, IDs, clothes, even the cash. Kim dusted the edges of the hole for prints. I stood back, listening to crickets finally starting up, trying to ignore the itch at the base of my skull. Kim radioed dispatch. "We have recovered potential evidence in multiple missing persons cases, Oak Ridge Trail. Logging everything. We're clearing the site." She gave me a look. "You okay?" I nodded, but my legs felt rubbery. When she hurried back into the pines to comb the area, I stayed by the path, scanning the tree line. Around 20 minutes later, Kim came back, face tight. No prints but boot scuffs. No camera. No sign of any other gear. Whoever did this came in alone, moved fast. Harris zipped the evidence bags closed. "We'll send the team in first light with dogs and grid search." I exhaled, tried to relax my shoulders. It was over for now. We headed back to the truck, each step loud on pine needles. I kept looking over my shoulder, feeling leaves shake though the air was still. When we reached the gravel road, I turned once more toward the trees. The mound was gone, just a depression in the earth. No sign of the pack or evidence. Someone had covered it with fresh leaves. I bit my lip, swallowed hard. Deputy Harris clapped me on the shoulder. "Good find, Lee. You saved some families a lot of pain." I forced a nod and climbed in the passenger seat. The truck rattled as Kim pulled onto the road. We drove away, headlights splashing over dark trunks. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every distant sound from a car door in the parking lot to a twig on the radiator made me bolt upright. I lay there staring at the ceiling, imagining footprints circling my tent, imagining him in the brush with that ghillie-like patience, digging, hiding. I pictured his boots on my floor, his hands brushing my gear. I pictured him watching as I found the pack and ran. At first light, the search team went back. They found nothing new, no prints, no sign of a camp, no trail markers. Just that gaping hole where dirt had been scooped out. They left a few small flags around it. I stood next to them, watching the dogs hesitate at the edge, tails stiff, nosing the ground. The lead handler radioed back, "No scent. He's gone clean." We packed up and left the site a third time. I said nothing on the drive home. I replayed every step when I heard the snap, how the path looked, how the scarf was folded. I thought about what I'd left behind, cash still stacked in the sun, evidence of lives ended without a struggle. Now, every time I go out on patrol, I carry a little extra gear, a packet of flour to cast footprints, more flags to mark strange spots, a second radio. I never hike alone, never walk off trail by myself. I'm not about to let him catch me digging my own grave. We rolled into the parking lot just before dusk, lugged our bags down to the cabin, and I swear the air felt heavier than any other rental place I'd stayed. The sign said Pine Creek Cabin, but it sat off the road, half hidden by maples and spruce. My partner, Jess, unlocked the door while I stared at the woods. Everything was so still. Inside was that damp wood smell you get in old cabins. Low ceilings, 2 chairs by a little stove, a narrow loft above. I dropped my pack and saw the guest book sitting on a shelf by the window. Jess flopped onto the couch, swung her legs over the side, and pointed at the book. "Let's see who's been here," she said. I skimmed a few entries: nice folks, kids learning to fish, couples on anniversaries. All polite. Then I hit one from a week ago. Scrawled in big letters. They watch from the trees at night. Don't open the door for anyone. No name, no date other than 7 days ago. My stomach flipped. I read it again. Jess looked up. "Someone's messing around," she said, shrugging. "Maybe," I said, though my voice sounded tight. I shut the book and tried to relax, but the windows framed endless dark trunks that stared back at me. We ate cold pasta from Tupperware, lights off, porch lantern on low. Outside, the woods were silent, no crickets, no owls, nothing. Then, a distant snap, like a heavy branch breaking. Jess froze. I froze. I wanted to laugh and say it's nothing, but I couldn't make the words come out. Later, in bed, the wind picked up. Branches scraped the roof like fingernails. I lay with my eyes open, feeling the air shift around the cabin. Jess slept beside me, steady breath. At some point, I heard another snap. Quieter this time. Not a branch. A footstep? It stopped so close I barely heard it. I rolled onto my side, stared through the window above my head. Nothing moved. Morning came gray and misty. We brewed coffee, sat in those wooden chairs, and I flipped the guest book back open. Under the warning, someone had written a reply. Saw lights flickering. Thought it was the stove fan, but stove's off. Keep your phone close. Just that. No follow-up. No more entries after. Jess wanted to hike, so we grabbed packs and hit the trail. Not the main path, some half-claimed track I'd seen on an old map. It looped around a creek back near the cabin. Halfway through, I glanced at my phone. No signal. That was normal. But Jess got a text from her mom, 3 bars, of all things, asking if we'd checked the guest book. We showed each other the last reply entry. Neither of us said it, but we felt like someone else was watching our screens. We cut the hike short and sprinted back just as the sun dipped below the ridgeline. On the porch, I noticed something new. Footprints pressed into the gravel, big boot tread patterns, starting at the tree line and ending right at the steps. I stared at them. I'd walked right past the spot that morning and they hadn't been there. Jess's voice was quiet. We should have closed the door. We locked it, double-checked the windows. Inside, I flipped lights on, flicked every switch. The glow of lamps filled the room, swallowed the corners. I curled the guest book open to that second entry, read it again. Somebody saw lights flickering at night, like someone else was in the cabin messing with the electricity or the stove fan. We split up to check the place. I went upstairs into the loft, old mattress, some spider webs. All undisturbed. No gear, no footprints in the dust. Jessie checked the back porch clean, save for some broken twigs I didn't remember. Back inside, I found her staring at the window. She pointed. Down below, 5 yards from the door, a shape moved through the brush. Black silhouette, hunched. I saw it for one heartbeat before it melted behind trees. My heart pounded. Jess whispered, "Call the ranger." Her phone had one bar. She dialed. No answer. We tried again, voicemail. She scribbled down the park office number from the trail map and called that. Static. Nobody. We set our packs by the door, tossed a flashlight and a pocket knife into the couch cushions. I paced, thinking. In my pocket, my keys felt heavy. Night came again too fast. We ate granola bars under the single ceiling lamp, each crunch echoing. Every breeze outside made the windows creak. After we ate, I sat in the chair closest to the door and Jess sat on the couch. We talked quietly, tried to make a plan. At 9:30, the lights suddenly dimmed. Not a flicker, just darker. Our lamp glowed dull yellow. Then the stove fan kicked on upstairs. A soft whine, like it was running on empty. We both looked at each other. That book was right, Jess said. I stood. Stay here. I grabbed the flashlight, aimed it at the ceiling, clicked it on. White beam cut through the gloom. Switched off the stove fan with the breaker. No more hum. I scanned the walls, everything looked normal. Then I heard it, a soft knock on the door. Not a bang, just a rap, slow. One knock, pause, two knocks. Pause, three. I gulped. I swung the beam to Jess. She just shook her head. I knelt, clicked the deadbolt. Then another 3 knocks. More force this time, like something leaning into it. I called out, "Who is it?" My voice cracked. I thought about the warning. Someone said, "Don't open for anyone." One more hard thud, then silence. The woods pressed in. My breath came fast. I edged toward the window by the door and looked out. Nothing but dark shapes. I pulled Jess behind me. "We're leaving," I said. We yanked on boots, threw on jackets, grabbed keys. I flung the door open and half ran down the stairs, Jess right behind. Outside, the night was cold. I peered into the tree lean. My flashlight beam passed over something blue fabric, then nothing. Jess clutched my arm. "Did you see that?" I nodded. We bolted for the car, at least 50 yards down that gravel drive. I fumbled the keys, started the engine. Headlights stabbed at the trees. I backed up, then floored it down the dirt road, tires kicking gravel. Behind us, the cabin light went out. We didn't slow down until we hit pavement. We kept driving until we hit a town with a 24-hour diner. We sat under bright fluorescent lights, holding mugs of coffee until sunrise. My hands shook so badly I kept spilling. By then, Park Patrol had called back, no reports of other incidents, and nobody else in that cabin in days. We never went back. I saw cops driving past us that morning, but we were already gone. I kept my phone number with the ranger station on speed dial after that, and I change cabins these days if I stay anywhere more than one night. I still think about that entry in the guest book, and those knocks on the door. Whoever they were, they watched us circle the cabin, flickered our lights, tapped the door to see if we opened. We got lucky and escaped. And I still can't shake the thought of what might have happened if we hadn't read that one warning a week too late. I met up with Sam at the trailhead just after sunrise. We planned this hike for weeks, 7-mile loop, some river crossings, supposed to be quiet this time of year. The kind of trip you do when you need to clear your head. We shoved our packs on, took one last look at the empty parking lot, and stepped onto the dirt path. The morning was crisp, smell of damp earth and pine needles. We chatted easy, talked about work, old roommates, nothing heavy. Around mile 2, We hit the first creek ford. Sam slipped on a wet rock, dropped his trekking pole. He cursed. I helped him up, and we kept going. That should have been a sign. After the creek, the trail narrowed. Trees arched overhead, blocked most of the sun. Leaves rattled, but only when a breeze blew through. Mostly it was quiet, too quiet. Our boots whispered on packed dirt. A few birds called, mostly woodpeckers, but they sounded far away. Around mile 3, Sam slowed. He glanced back. "Did you hear that?" he asked. I paused. Nothing but our breathing in the distant creek. "Hear what?" He shook his head, kept moving. We stayed pretty close, the usual buddy system. Maybe 50 feet apart. At mile 4, the trail forked. The signs pointed left for the loop, right for a spur that doubled back. We went left. As soon as we did, Sam stopped again. "Okay, that time I heard something," he said. Behind us, just past the spur junction, a twig snapped. Hard, under heavy weight. I jerked around but saw only trees. The sun flashed through broken branches, but no one moved in the shadows. Sam's face was pale. "Maybe someone else is out here," he said. "Hiker who didn't check in or something." I laughed a little. "Yeah, maybe." But I wasn't sure. We hadn't passed another person in over an hour. We kept hiking. I tried to laugh it off, pointed out a funky fungus growing on a log, but half my brain was turned up, listening. At mile 5, the trail dipped down to the second river crossing. I glanced up the bank and almost missed him. He stood there, straddling the path, a good 60 yards ahead of us. Tall, broad shoulders, dark green jacket, baseball cap low over his eyes. No pack, just heavy boots and cargo pants. He looked like he'd been camping, but there was no tent or stove. He stood perfectly still, stared right at us. I slowed. Sam saw him too and squinted. Then the man turned his head slightly, like he picked one of us to watch, and walked off trail into the pines. He didn't hurry, just drifted into the brush. We both froze. The river burbled below us, the only thing that moved. I didn't know what to do. "Did you see him?" I asked. Sam nodded. "Yeah." We crossed the shallow river fast, voices low. When we climbed the bank, we hustled ahead, boots spitting gravel. I glanced back once. No one. Just trees bending in a breeze. By mile 6, panic was settling in. My gut twisted whenever I slowed, like something bad would catch up. Sam kept his pace steady but quiet. I tried calling out, "Hello? Anybody there?" but my voice cracked. No answer. No echo. The woods swallowed it. We hit the final climb and saw the overlook rock ledge, mountain views. Usually people stop there for photos. That day, it was empty. Good, I thought. Last chance of running into him again. We sat, gulped water, tried to calm down. I checked my phone, no signal, just a little SOS only. Trailhead was a mile down. We could run if we had to. As we stood to leave, I saw him again. He stepped out of the brush maybe 100 yards away, right on the trail, watching us. He had that same slow gait, no pack. He walked toward US, boots crunching on leaves, arms swinging like he owned the place. Sam and I both took a breath. I wanted to ask, "Can we help you?" but my throat closed. The man stopped maybe 50 yards out and raised a hand, nodding greeting. More like a warning. I whispered to Sam, "We need to move." We turned and walked fast, almost jogging, backs hunched. I heard him behind us, footsteps, but at first distant, then closer, matching our pace. I risked a look over my shoulder. He was still a bit back, but coming. No shout, no cry, just boots and his steady shape. My heart pounded. We hit a switchback and I saw the flat tail end of the trail, the small clearing where cell service sometimes jumped in. Maybe 5 bars. I powered up my phone, fingers shaking, dialed 911. Behind me, the footsteps stopped. I spun around. No one. Only trees, but they felt too close. I called, help. Hikers following us. The line cut to voicemail. I jammed the call button again. Silence and that click tone. My nails dug into the screen. Get moving, I said to Sam. We ran. I didn't look back until we burst out of the woods, sneakers crunching across leaf-strewn asphalt. A family in a minivan pulled in, looked at us like we'd lost our minds. I yelled, he's in there. Call 911 and pointed back at the dark tree line. They stopped their car, Mom got out, took one look at us and dialed. Sam and I backed toward the van, hands over our heads. The man never came out. Instead, I felt the air change, no wind, no birds, just that quiet. Police arrived 10 minutes later. We told them everything, where we saw him, how he followed, the footsteps that matched ours. They wouldn't go in without backup. After another 10 minutes, rangers came with cameras. Overhead trail cams covered most sections. They downloaded footage, Sam and me hiking happily at the start, then meeting the man out by the second river crossing, then us at the overlook, then again on the lower trail. Clear as day. But here's the thing, park logs track everyone who signs in at the kiosk. You swipe your permit, it records your plate and your entry time. Rangers checked, no one matching his jacket description, no one matching his boots, no one entered. Yet the camera showed him, on camera, in the park, walking multiple points along that loop on the same day we did. That gave me chills more than him following. He should have never been there. No record. No car. No permit. He just appeared. They called it trespassing and stalking. They combed the area for days, dogs, drones, more cameras. Nothing. No abandoned car, no hidden camp. Just his footprints trailing ours, then fading away. We got statements taken, then they set us up with counseling and safe camp tips. I never stopped checking the news for an arrest. Nothing. No mention of him anywhere. I avoid that park now. I stick to crowded trails, day hikes only. I still think about that guy's slow walk, how he moved in sync with us, like he'd practiced. And how he didn't belong there. No permit, no car, no campsite, just a man who followed us through the woods and vanished. Camera evidence be damned. I saw the trail closed sign just past the parking lot, half hidden behind a bent-over sapling, but me and Sam were in a hurry. We'd driven 2 hours for a day hike, and the main loop was another 5 miles we didn't want. So we stepped around the Rottenwood sign and took the shortcut up the ridge. At first it was normal. Overgrown roots, fallen branches, but a faint path cut through the ferns. We joked about being outlaws for ignoring park rules. Sam snapped photos of the wildflowers. I tried to keep my boots light so I didn't break any twigs. The air smelled like wet grass and pine. About 30 minutes and we hit a clearing with a dead stump. Sam stopped to examine moss patterns. I leaned on my walking stick and listened. Wind rustled leaves, a distant bird call. Nothing felt off. We got back on the path, which narrowed so tight my shoulders almost brushed the brambles. An hour passed and the incline got steeper. Breath came fast. I noticed the sunlight dropped out quickly, trees pressed overhead. Sam said he needed water. I filled his bottle from a trickle of a spring down the bank. That's when I heard the first crack of a branch. Slow. Behind us. We both froze. I glanced back. Nothing but trunks. Sam shrugged. Branches break. He drank water. I said okay, but my pulse jumped. We kept going. About 10 minutes later, we heard it again. Slow crack, then a soft snap, like someone stepped on a twig. I turned. No movement. The path behind was empty. I called, "Hello?" My voice felt long in the woods. No echo answered. Sam picked at a loose piece of bark and said, "Probably a deer." I nodded, but I wasn't sure. We reached a rocky switchback marking roughly 2 hours in. We'd been making okay time, hoping to pop out near the overlook. Instead, the trail vanished under roots and the map hopped us into the middle of thick growth. I checked my GPS, still off the official loop. That's when I realized we'd been hearing steps, but we sounded no earth-shaking. Every time we stopped, something else stopped. Never before, never after. Like a shadow that paused when we paused. We paused ourselves and just listened. Nothing for a full minute. Then, snap above us, a slender branch bent. I looked up and saw no one, only the curve of bark and stray needles. Sam raised his eyebrows. That's weird. I nodded. Keep moving. We hustled through ferns, trying to find the faint path again. I kept looking back, expecting a face pressed against a tree. Instead, just more trees, perfect rows. Half an hour later, I swear I saw a shape step between two trunks, just 2 feet off the trail. It stood upright, shoulders slumped, dark clothes blending into bark. I froze. It didn't move, maybe trying to hide. I whispered to Sam, "Did you see that?" He swung his pack around and flipped on his flashlight. The beam darted but found nothing. We ran that stretch, not full sprint, but fast. We stopped near a dry creek bed and gasped for air. Sam rattled his pack. "Phone's dead." I checked mine, no signal, dead battery. We only had 2 energy bars left and a half bottle of water. We weren't in good shape. "Maybe we should head back," I said, though I'd already thought of that. Turning around meant meeting this person head on. But going forward meant deeper in the unknown. My stomach clenched. We followed what looked like a deer trail down toward a creek. The sun was low now, angled, turned everything red-brown. I kept thinking I heard footsteps behind us, soft but deliberate. Not matching our pace, not stopping when we stopped. Always a beat or two behind, then gone. We reached the creek. It was more of a trickle, but enough to wet our water bottles. Sam bent down. I scanned the woods. Over my shoulder, I caught a glimpse of something moving with my peripheral vision. I swiveled. Nothing. My throat felt dry. We crossed the creek. They pulled my pant leg under, water cold and fast over my ankle. On the other side, ferns flattened in a circle, a crouch spot. I edged around it to avoid it. Sam found it too and looked pale. We decided to backtrack. I led, Sam followed. I watched every route. We walked slower, trying to make less noise, to see him first. Branches snagged Sam's jacket, he whispered curses. He looked behind, I looked back, for about 10 minutes of sticky silence. Then, snap, he jumped. "Damn it," he said. I turned to see where the sound came from. Dozens of feet behind, a footprint in the mud. Not ours. Fresh. One boot tread, direction match ours. I bent down, touched the print. Moist and sharp edges. My heart knocked. Sam tapped my shoulder. We shouldn't be here. I agreed. We moved faster, but carefully. The woods darkened, sky squeezed out. Cold touched my neck. Then, a low rustle, not leaf on leaf, not wind, more like a coat brushing a branch. It came from close, maybe 5 feet. I held out my hand. Sam, he froze. We held our breath. Something stopped moving. Then came a footstep, soft but heavy. Not on leaves, on dirt. They were coming closer. I couldn't see, but I could hear. The spot was narrow, only room for 2. If we turned and ran, the path curved uphill. If we pressed forward, we ran past the point where we first saw the sign. Neither seemed good. I whispered, "Run on 3." He nodded. 1, I exhaled. Our feet shivered on the ground. 2, I looked ahead. Tops of trees glowed. 3, we sprinted. Our boots pounded, breaths ripped. I risked a glance back. Just dark. No shape. But footsteps stayed behind, matching ours. They didn't speed up, didn't slow down, just chased us. We hit the old logging road, wide, rutted, a straight line home. The rush of open space hit me. I ran full tilt, Sam right behind. We breathed so hard our chests burned. That pounding stopped behind only when the road bent out of the woods toward the parking lot. Headlights from a truck came around the bend. I threw my arms up. The driver slowed. Park ranger. I recognized the patch. He opened his window. "You two okay?" I gasped. Someone was following us. In the woods. He scanned the tree line. No one should be in there. Trail was closed. He killed the engine and reached for the radio. "This is Ranger Clark. I've got 2 hikers out here claiming someone's in the closed section. Can you check the remote cams?" Another ranger showed up 5 minutes later. Clark led us to the trail cams, motion sensors posted at the sign 2 hours ago. The screen showed us sneaking past the closure sign at 2:14. Next clip, we're an hour deep. Camera picked up movement 30 feet back, brown jacket, no pack, walking slowly. We saw him, but cams caught him too. Then we shook him off. Finally, we ran out. That was the last clip. Clark shook his head. No permits entered after the sign. No vehicles. He shouldn't exist. He drove us back to the ranger station, gave us water and first aid for scrapes. He logged our report. We gave statements. He promised to search at first light, dogs, GPS sweep. I got home next day, slept with all lights on. Days later, they found no one. No campsite, no tracks. The footage stayed on the server. I can't erase it, me, Sam, and him, always just 20 or 30 feet behind. Watching. Never speaking. Never even seeing our faces. Just following us through the woods, as if we were on a leash. And then gone. I was halfway through my solo patrol when I saw the branches. It was just a tangle of pine boughs and leaves someone had laid over what looked like a flat surface, too neat for natural fall. I stepped off the muddy path, ducked under the brush, and realized it was a van. White, boxy, parked 10 yards from the trail. No plates, no markings, nothing but a layer of twigs to hide it. That area was deep forest, miles from any service road. I'd walked this loop dozens of times and never once seen a vehicle. I holstered my radio mic, crept closer. The driver's window was cracked an inch. I pressed my ear to the glass, no sounds, just a muffled call of a chase somewhere above. No engine noise, no music, no whisper of life. I backed away slowly and called it in. Dispatch, this is Ranger Cole. Unregistered vehicle, off trail, grid reference, over. While I jabbed GPS coordinates, I looked around. The air felt thick, like someone had the forest closed in behind them. I kept my hand near my pepper spray, just in case. Dispatch said they'd send backup, ETA 20 minutes. I had time, I thought. I circled around the front of the van and checked for footprints, nothing fresh in the leaf litter. Screw marks on the door handle looked recent, but no footprints meant it had been carried in or someone had brushed them away. I tried the door. Locked. I slid my flashlight beam over the side windows. Tops of plastic grocery bags showed behind the driver's seat. I found a sliding door latch and popped it open with a tool from my belt. The door squealed. Inside, it was unnerving in its neatness. A row of plastic Ziploc bags sat on a little shelf behind the passenger seat. Each bag had a date and a name: Day 1, Trail A, Day 2, Trail B, and so on, printed in block letters on masking tape. Inside were granola bars, dried fruit, jerky. Everything portioned precisely. Below the shelf, a stack of park trail maps lay on a fold-out table. Someone had circled various paths in thick red ink, then drawn connecting lines between them. It looked like a spider web. Next to the maps was a small cardboard box labeled phones, taped shut. I pried it open. Inside were 10 burner phones, no logos, no SIM slots. Just a grid of identical handsets and a rubber band. My pulse sped up. Who was here? Why had they supplies for multiple days? Why maps with red circles like they planned routes, not hikes? I shone my flashlight toward the back. A cot folded against the wall, some blankets, a camp stove. There was a duffel bag in the corner with camouflage pants sticking out. It was too much gear for one person. Whoever used this van had set up a mobile base. Whenever I parked on back roads, I looked for white paint and twig piles. When a stranger asked for directions off trail, I smiled, but I nodded. Not today. Not again. A rustle behind me made me spin. Sunlight dipped below branches, turned everything dim. I caught a glimpse of movement past the windshield, a dark shape slipping between trees. I swallowed hard, rapped on the side panel. Hello? Come out peaceful. My voice sounded thin. No answer. The forest swallowed my words. My radio crackled. Ranger Cole, do you copy? The dispatcher's voice was distant. I swallowed. Copy. I'm at the unregistered vehicle. Something's not right. Proceed with caution. Backup is en route. I ducked back inside and grabbed one of the phones, flipped it on. Dead battery. Then I saw papers shoved under the driver's seat, identification cards, laminated, heat-worn. I pulled them out, names of hikers missing this season. 2 from May, 1 from June, another from last year. Photos, scanners face down, showed no addresses, but I'd seen those faces on missing posters. A twig snapped outside. Close. My heart thudded so loud I thought the headlights would pick it up. I slipped the IDs into my vest and stood. Better not touch more. As I pushed the door closed, the interior light flickered on, battery wired to a sensor. Then off. I felt watched. Leaned my back against the van, peered into the gloom. The shadows between trees looked too still, as if someone waited for me to move. I tapped my radio. Dispatch, I need eyes on this now. Then I heard a muted beep behind me, a burner phone powering up. I pivoted. The van's sliding door swung inward. Someone had unlatched it slowly. I jumped back, drawing my pepper spray. Branches scraped against the roof. A boot print appeared on the edge of the door sill, fresh mud. "Hey!" I yelled. "Show yourself." My breath came fast. Silence. Then the soft pat of a footstep on dead leaves. I turned off my flashlight to see if that drew them. The dark was velvety, no shapes for a moment. Then I saw two curved lines of reflection where eyes would be. Movement high above, a figure slipping down a tree, landing light on the forest floor. I grabbed my radio. "Send me unit now." "Suspect is here." No reply but static. The backup team had phones bouncing. I cursed under my breath. I was alone, then blocking me from fast exit. The figure stepped into a sliver of moonlight, a man, mid-30s, wearing the same camouflage I'd seen in the duffel. He didn't speak. Just stared, arms at his sides, boots muddy. His face half-shadowed. My spray finger shook. He took a step toward me. Leaves crunched faintly. I took another step back. The van was a barrier, but if he got around it, I'd be boxed in. My mind raced, pepper spray, flashlight in the eyes, radio mic for noise. I clicked the mic. "This is Cole, suspect in camo, brandishing no weapon, ready to engage." My words fell flat. No immediate response. Just distant static. The man smiled, just the corner of his mouth, like a joke I didn't get. He raised his hand, pointed a finger at me, then looked at the van. I think he wanted something back. Maybe the IDs. He took a cautious step around the front. I backed up until I hit the brush. Snap of a twig to my right. He circled soft, watching. I swept my light. He dodged the beam, slipped sideways behind a trunk. Panic surged. I fumbled my pepper spray. I stunned, thinking of facing him alone. Then, radio burst. "Call, backup is 5 minutes out. Hang tight." Relief was instant. 5 minutes felt like forever. I edged around the van quietly, keeping low. With each step, the brush clutched at me. The man never called out, never rushed. Just mirrored my movement with ease, a silent stalker. I looked ahead, back to the trail, maybe 200 yards. If I made a run for it, faster than him if he hesitated. But then I remembered, I had keys to the truck parked down the trailhead, not here. No vehicle, only the van. And he was between me and any help. My radio crackled again. "Call, halfway there." I swallowed. 5 minutes meant 10 or 15. I needed space. I opted for distraction. I grabbed a loose branch, whipped it at the van's sliding door. It banged loudly. Then I kicked at the wheel well. Metal clang slapped through the trees. I didn't wait. I bolted left, into deeper brush, heading away from him and toward the trailhead direction. Branches whipped my face. Roots snatched at my boots. I kept my head down, charging. Behind me, I heard him curse softly, 2 syllables, guttural and crashing after. But my lungs burned, adrenaline carried me faster than I ever ran. I hit a small rise and saw the broken trail close barrel at the official path. I dove under branches and tumbled onto the trail. My boots slapped dirt. I looked back, empty woods. He hadn't followed. I stumbled upright, fumbling for my radio mic. I'm on trail. Heading to truck. Suspect lost. Over. No answer, but the woods felt silent good, not ominous. I ran past the barrel, toward the parking lot 20 minutes away by foot. I kept glancing back, half expecting his silhouette, but never saw him. Out of breath, I burst onto the gravel, headlights behind me. 2 patrol trucks roared into view, red and blue lights strobed. I flopped against a bumper. 2 Rangers jumped out, gave me water and a radio boost. I pointed back toward the van. We drove in tandem, me in front, then behind the chainsaw of an engine. When we reached the spot, the van was gone. No branch pile, no tire tracks. Just flattened grass where it waited. No sign of him. They took my statement, loaded the Ziplocs, maps, phones into evidence. I didn't sleep that night at the station. In the morning, every search party came back blank, no suspect, no camp, no hidden base. The van had vanished, like someone packed everything in and drove off through the trees. I stayed armed for months after. I locked up the cabin around 6, just before the sun dipped behind the pines. My boots were always by the door, old leather Danners I'd broken in years ago. I tucked the keys under the mat, shut off the lantern, and headed out for my evening patrol. No one else was on shift that night. It was just me, my truck, and a loop of trail that took me past the creek crossings and back. I made my usual rounds, checked the south bridge for rot, made sure the signs at the overlook hadn't been kicked down, called in my position on the radio. Everything was quiet. Frogs by the water, a few crickets, wind in the needles. I didn't see anyone out there. Didn't want to. Around 9, I turned back toward the cabin. My radio battery was half dead, so I planned to swap it out and crash early. I pushed the lantern indoors, flicked on the single overhead bulb, and closed the door behind me. It was unlocked. My heart flipped. I always locked it. I checked the latch, fully open, not even pulled tight. I leaned in, calling hello. The air inside was still, warmer than outside. No breeze through the gap. No footsteps. I flicked on my flashlight and shone it across the floor. My boots weren't where I left them. They'd sat neatly side by the door, same spot every night. Now they were pushed into the corner near the sink, caked with fresh mud. I swallowed. My voice shook when I said, "Okay." I didn't want to believe someone had slipped in behind me. I trained the beam on my gear rack. My cooking kit hung above the mini stove. Last night's dishes were still drying. I noticed one thing missing, a metal fork I always left in the mug. I tipped the cup, just a spoon and a plastic spork lay inside. No fork. My breath caught. I backed out of the cabin and shut the door, flicking the deadbolt even though it was already locked. I kept my flashlight on, circled the building. Nothing, no prints in the gravel, no broken brush. The door handle looked untouched except for muddy smudges high up, like someone had reached past my shoulder. I went back inside, ran my fingers along the countertop until I felt something paper-thin taped to the mirror above the sink. I pulled it down. You leave too many tracks. No signature. No date. Just those words in block letters, as if cut from a paper stockpile. My chest cramped. I pointed the flashlight at the note, the mirror, the empty hook where my fork used to hang. I felt the sting of sweat on my upper lip even though the night was cool. I clicked the radio mic. "This is Ranger Griffin at Cabin 3. I need dispatch confirmation on cabin security check." My voice echoed. Silence. I hit it again. "Dispatch, please respond." Only static. I shoved the mirror aside, braced my palm on the sink, and stared at my own worn-out face. The light cast deep shadows under my eyes. I felt watched. Something tapped behind me, a soft thud against the outer wall. My flashlight truncated the beam, but I caught a flicker of movement outside the window. Barely a blur, human-shaped. I spun, aimed the light at the door. Then at the window. No one. Just my breath misting in the beam. I needed to get out. I yanked my keys from my pocket and slipped them into the lock. The door opened with a creak that made me cringe. I stepped outside, slammed it shut, turned the deadbolt again, and ran for the truck. Gravel crunched under my boots. I threw myself in the driver's seat, fumbled the keys into the ignition. The engine roared. I sat there, hands shaking on the wheel, scanning the trees. There was nothing but pines and shadows. I called dispatch on my cell, no service. I tried the truck radio, barely a hiss. I flipped on the dome light. In the reflection, I saw mud on my boots and the old Danners pushed into the corner of the cabin floating behind me in the glass. I backed out onto the dirt road and peeled gravel until I hit the ranger station 2 miles away. I burst inside, breath ragged, and told the sergeant what happened. Door unlocked, boots moved, fork gone, note on mirror. He grabbed his flashlight and we drove back together. When we got to cabin 3, everything looked normal. The door was locked. No note. No boots by the door. No muddy smudges on the handle. No fork missing. I stood on the gravel, shining my light at the cabin windows. The oak railings were intact. The tiny porch had no footprints beyond mine. The forest loomed silent. He radioed base, run logs for cabin check. Who's had access? They confirmed, only me, and no checks since I left 3 hours ago. I stayed in his office that night. He drove me home first light. The note never reappeared. The fork never showed up. I double-check my locks now. I leave the light on all night. Whenever I walk past a mirror, I test the glass for writing. I haven't slept at cabin 3 again. I met him on Monday. I was volunteering to clear brush along the East Ridge Trail, wearing old jeans and a sweat-stained cap. I'd been there maybe an hour when I saw him, a man sitting on a fallen log, eyes glued to a pair of binoculars. He didn't jump or wave. Just tipped his head, like he'd heard me. I nodded, didn't want to spook him, and kept trimming. On Tuesday he was back in the same spot, same clothes, a faded green jacket, canvas pants, a baseball cap. He had an empty thermos beside him. I passed at a distance, tried joking, watching birds. He glanced at me, said nothing, and kept staring through those lenses. Wednesday, I brought my lunch to see if he'd move. He was there again, hunkered low, scanning the far end of the trail. I sat on a rock 20 feet away, ate a sandwich. He didn't look at me once. I asked, "You okay?" He didn't answer. I felt like I interrupted something important, so I slipped away. Thursday, the sky rumbled, thunder rolled off the ridge. I grabbed a rake and walked by. He was soaking wet, rain dripping off his cap, binoculars held up as if the storm wouldn't touch him. No shelter. No sign of a tent. I called out, "Grab your gear, come to the station," but he didn't flinch. Just put the binoculars down, wiped rain off the lens, then lifted them again. That night I checked the ranger log. No permits for camping along the ridge. No campsite under that log. I scribbled notes in the margin, "Check that guy." I tried to picture who he was watching, but it made no sense. Friday morning I found footprints, 2 sets leading up the trail into thick brush, ending at that log. One set was big, heavy, the other small, delicate. They were fresh, from last night's rain, pressed into the mud. I looked for a second set returning, but only the big boots headed back to the trail. I stared at the ground. Neither of us followed those small prints. I brushed them away. I told myself it was deer or someone messing around. I went back to brush clearing, kept an eye on him. He never moved from his perch. Saturday, I came with a camera. I was going to take a picture of the wildflowers on that slope, but I ended up taking a snap of him, face half shadowed under his cap. He caught me, lowered his binoculars and leaned forward, hands clasped. I waved and mouth high, but he didn't wave back. He just stared at me, a faint smile on one side of his mouth. Something about that smile made my skin crawl. Stupid little things, the way his finger tapped the barrel of the log, the way his boots dug into the dirt. He wasn't scanning the trail. He was waiting for something. On Sunday, I decided to approach. I stepped onto the log where he sat. My heart pounded in my throat. He didn't flinch. I stood taller than him, hands on my hips. "Hey," I said. "I've asked nicely. You gotta leave. This area is closed for volunteers only." He looked up, took off his cap, and laid it on the log. Sweat or rain? I couldn't tell. He folded his hands over the binoculars. "I'm waiting for her," he said. Voice calm, like reading from a script. "She always comes back here eventually." I blinked. "Who?" My voice sounded thin. He shifted slightly. "My daughter." He pointed his chin down the trail. "She went hiking a month ago. Said she'd meet me here on Sunday. I don't know what happened, but she always comes back here. She said so. That was 2 weeks ago. Search parties went out. No sign of anyone. I told him they'd find something." He nodded, eyes squeezed tight. "I know, but she always comes back here. I don't leave." A knot formed in my stomach. I thought about the small footprints. I thought about the way his boots were always wet, as if he'd been off trail every night. I thought about the photo where he watched me. He expected her. He expected me. I swallowed. "You can't stay here," I said. "It's too dangerous." He stood up, folding his jacket over the binoculars. He looked smaller standing. "She'll come," he said. "By this Sunday." I backed away. On the trail I met 2 rangers headed uphill. I told them everything: footprints, no permit, his promise to wait. They walked me back. When we reached the log, he was gone. Cap, binoculars, thermos, everything left behind. Just the log and the deep gouges where his boots sat. They called in a search again. I asked them to watch the slope at dawn. For a week, he came back. Always at sunrise, always in the same clothes. And every Sunday, he asked for her. Sunday, 2 weeks later, I walked that ridge again. I found fresh footprints in the wet grass, 2 sets, big and small. They headed into the brush. No return prints. I stood on that log and listened. Wind rattled leaves. A jay squawked. Sun seeped through the pines. I didn't stay to see if she'd come back. I left the way I came. I never told anyone what I saw in his eyes, how sure he was she'd walk out of those trees, smiling, just like he'd always believed. I didn't need to. That was enough to make me keep my distance, clear the trail, and always watch the woods. I found the pack just past the north switchback, lying on its side beside the trail. I was making my morning loop usual patrol when I spotted the blue pack under a maple sapling. It looked new. Bright straps, no tears. I lifted it by the handle and checked around. No hiker in sight, nothing dropped nearby. I unzipped the main compartment and saw granola bars, an apple, a half-used water bottle with clear liquid. Everything looked fresh, like someone set it down minutes before. My first thought was lost hiker, so I radioed base, Ranger West. I've got an unattended pack at Grid 5B. Could be a solo hiker gone off trail. I left the pack where it was, didn't want to contaminate anything. I made a quick circle around the area. No footprints in the mud, no broken twigs, nothing. Just the empty trail and my own boot prints. I waited 10 minutes. Nothing. No crackling branches, no distant call. The woods were unnaturally quiet, like they were holding their breath. I called it in again, no sign of owner. I'll take pack back to station and put out a lost hiker alert. I scooped the pack onto my shoulder and followed the trail back down. By midday the alert went out over the radio and posted at trailheads. Lost backpack, I said, fresh food inside. No name tag. I kept thinking someone would call and worried. But all afternoon, nothing. Hikers asked if I was joking. They laughed a little. Just grab the pack if you see it, I told them. I checked the cameras at the north trailhead. No one came through after dawn without a pack. Entry logs showed hikers in groups, all accounted for. That night I went home early, feeling weird. How do you just abandon all your food? If the owner went off trail, I figured they'd be thirsty by morning and call it in. But no call came. Day 2, I brought the pack back where I found it, the way hikers could see it. I left a note, pack found. Claim at Ranger Station. And I taped it to a tree. I figured I'd find it gone the next day, or someone would ask about it. But at breakfast I got a call, still there. I parked my truck and headed out. The pack hadn't moved. I peeled off the note, tossed it in a trash bag, and slung the pack in my truck bed. I felt stupid for thinking this was a lost tourist. Maybe someone was messing with me. Day 3, I got a report of noises on the East Ridge, yelling, but faint, as if somebody was talking to themselves. That afternoon I hiked up to check. The ridge trail is narrow, rocky, with big pines arching overhead. No one hikes there alone. Halfway up, I heard a voice, muted, behind a cluster of boulders. I saw them. They don't look. It stopped when I froze. I whispered, "Hello?" Silence. I shone my light between rocks, nothing. No footprints, no gear. I called base. Possible trespasser near ridge. No pack, no fire. They told me to keep an eye out. I kept hiking, tension building in each step. The slope was steep and fall-off was real. I kept scanning, expecting to see someone slip behind a tree. I found nothing. The rest of the hike was empty, no bird calls, no wind. When I got back, darkness was settling. I slept poorly. Every creak in the cabin sounded like footsteps. Day 4, I decided to follow up on any tracks near where I left the pack. I drove out before dawn. I walked the trail edge, looking for footprints. 9 days of rain had softened the soil, so I expected clear tracks. Nothing on the main trail. Then, off trail about 50 feet, I spotted boot prints, one set, small heel, narrow tread, splashes of mud on the sides. The prints headed into brush, curved around a fallen log, and stopped at a little clearing I'd never noticed before. The clearing was maybe 10 feet across, surrounded by young maple and ash. Under a pine was a tarp stretched between two saplings, weighted by rocks. Next to it, a small camp, a folding chair, a couple of empty bottles, and a tarp folding kit. I crouched and saw scraps of sandwich crust in a plastic bag, half-drunk soda, nothing perishable. The camp looked used today, maybe even this morning. My stomach nodded. Whoever left the pack was living here, off-trail, right by a popular path. I called dispatch. Base, I've got unauthorized campsite in Grid 5B, near that lost pack location. I'm going in. They told me to wait for backup, but I had to see who it was. I left word that I was going in alone. Radio was strong here. I slipped into the brush. My radio crackled. I climbed down to the clearing. The tarp made a little roof over the chair. No one in sight. A steady breeze rustled needles. I flicked on my light and swept it. Nothing organic, no sleeping bag, no extra gear. Just a small duffel under the chair and an old field journal on a flat rock. I opened it. Scribbles, dates, times, trail names. Phrases like they come in groups. I can see them from here. Nothing signed, just a rant in messy handwriting. I felt eyes on me out there. I spun. Branches moved, no wind. A figure must have been watching, hidden. My pulse throbbed so loud I felt it in my ears. I ducked back, radio in hand. Base, I'm at the site. Looks active. No sign of occupant. I'm pulling back. I didn't wait for reply. I sprinted up the slope, branches slapping my face. When I burst onto the trail, my boots sounded like thunder. I waved at a group of hikers passing. They stared and moved aside. I felt exposed, stupid for going alone. I stayed on the trail, followed it back to the station. When I got there, 2 deputies rolled in, lights flashing. They'd gotten my message. We drove back together, me guiding. They scoured the clearing and brush, dogs on leash. No one. Nothing. No extra footprints beyond the narrow ones I saw. The tarp, duffel, journal, all exactly where I left them. They loaded the journal and duffel as evidence and flagged the camp. I spent that night in the station, listening to reports. No calls from hikers. No missing person reports. They promised to grid the surrounding area with drones at first light. I drove back to the clearing next morning with 2 more rangers. The tent was gone, packed up perfectly. No tarp, no chair, no journal, no duffel. Just flattened grass where the campsite was and a few scuffed leaves. The narrow boot prints led away from the clearing, crossed the trail, and headed up a hill we tagged poisonous for its broken glass and old traps. We followed them a little, then lost them in thick brambles. The ground beyond was hard and dry, no prints. They told me to mark it off and leave. We hiked out in a group of 4, checking every shadow. I kept my radio open, heart in my throat. Every beep felt like a warning. Weeks passed. No arrests, no calls, no find. The campsite was officially closed, but the brush grew back fast. I never hiked that side alone again. When I patrolled, I watched the trees with a new wariness, like they might hide eyes, a camp, a pack I didn't see. And sometimes, when it was just me on the trail at dawn, I'd look off the path and wonder who was living out there, quietly watching hikers wander by, grabbing half a sandwich from a pack, moving in the night, always staying a step ahead. A ghost in camo, maybe, but all too real. I finished the last log entry at 11:07 p.m., shut off the computer, and reached for my keys. The ranger station was old, creaky floors, drafty windows, and the lock on the door stuck half the time. I locked up every night, even though nobody ever tried to get in. I flipped the deadbolt, jiggled the handle, then spun and headed to the bathroom to grab my radio charger. When I came back, the door wouldn't open. I swore and jiggled the knob. The deadbolt felt tight. I tapped on the glass pane. Hello? Anyone here? Nothing. The lights inside were all off. My boots clicked on the concrete porch as I tried the handle again. Locked solid. I dug out my phone, no signal, of course. I patted my uniform pockets, radio, flashlight, multi-tool, no spare key. The spare lived in the supervisor's office, which was, on the other side of that door. I slid my hand under the door frame. No gap. I knocked once, then twice, louder. Silence answered, thick as the night air. I took a deep breath and pulled my light out. The beam cut a path across the front yard, picnic tables, a bulletin board with peeling old maps, then the gravel road beyond. I followed it with my eyes. Mile marker 12 pointed deeper into the woods. The road vanished into darkness past that. I clicked on my radio mic dispatch, Ranger Mills. Station doors locked. No one responding. Over. Static crackled back. No answer. I squatted and ran a hand along the bottom of the door, dust but no scuff marks from feet. Whoever locked me out did it from inside. Or they locked it after I left and slipped out before I got back. I felt exposed, like I was standing on stage in the dark. The station sat alone, 3 miles from the nearest cabin, phone line dead, radio only way to call for backup. My radio crackled again. Ranger Mills? You still there? Over. I exhaled. Relief was slow. Yeah, I said. I'm locked out. Can someone I don't know override the system or come let me in? Over. They said they'd send someone. ETA 20 minutes. I clicked off the mic just as my flashlight caught something fresh on the gravel road, tire tracks. White tires, deep grooves, offset to the right like the driver turned hard, slid sideways, then gunned the engine. The gravel flung up in small arcs. I shined the light past the road. The tracks led away, deeper into the pines, toward the closed-off forest road I knew was blocked by a gate a mile down. But that gate was closed, chain-locked. Someone would have had to break it or lift it. A distant owl hooted twice. Usually that was normal, this park's full of great horned owls. But tonight it sounded stiff, not relaxed, like it was testing me. I checked my watch, 11:15. I zipped my jacket and stepped off the porch, following the tracks. Gravel crunched under my boots. The beam swung left, then right, picking up broken branches. Tufts of moss signs someone had been in a hurry, not caring if they cut saplings. I reached the gate. The chain was intact, but the gate was open maybe a foot. Enough for a tire to slip through. I crouched and ran my fingers along the metal, no rust, fresh scratches along the hinge. Someone forced it. Beyond the gate, the abandoned service road looked black, narrow. I shone the light down it. The tracks stopped. Like the van just used the open gate, drove through, vanished into the darkness. I strode forward, hearing the branches sigh against the beam of light. I thought I heard footsteps in the brush, no rustle, just a soft thud every few seconds, matching my pace. I froze. Shone the light left. Nothing. Right. Nothing. I shook my head. My throat felt dry. I kept walking, faster now, until I hit the crossroads for the fire tower trail. The tracks ended there, right at the corner. 2 deep grooves, then nothing. Someone parked, walked off. I followed the path up the hill. It was steeper, roots curled like snakes, and I had to dig my boots in. My heart pounded, not from the climb, but from thinking about who was out here. A branch cracked overhead. I spun. A shadow melted between 2 trunks, standing there, watching. A man's shape, broad shoulders, tall. No flashlight. I couldn't see his face, just a silhouette. I swallowed and called, "Hey!" My voice was too loud, startled. The shadow didn't move. I clicked my light around his feet, no sign of a pack or gear. He stood still, like a statue. My radio buzzed. "Nels, are you there?" I clicked the mic. "Yeah, I'm up by the old fire tower." Someone left the gate open and drove in. "I'm investigating." "Over." My radio sputtered. The man moved in, melting into the trees uphill. He didn't run, just slumped back, out of sight. I peered after him, thoughts racing. Who's he? Why drive in here? And why watch me? By now the wind had picked up, though I didn't hear any trees moving. Needles rattled, but branches stayed still. I felt like the forest was quiet on purpose, waiting. It wasn't offering reassurance. It was holding its breath. I turned and sprinted down the trail, boots slipping, sticks snapping underfoot. I kept my light beam on the path, not daring to glance back. The station felt miles away, unreachable. My radio died with a final static pop. No help. I hit the crossroads and took the gravel road back to the station. 10 minutes that felt like an hour. My legs burned. I reached the porch and saw a silhouette in the window, someone standing behind the glass, too still to be normal. My pulse thumped as I raised my flashlight. Through the grime I saw him, thin, dark jacket, baseball cap pulled low. He stared at me, lips parted like he remembered a line. Then he stepped back, pulled a branch off the porch column, hopped down, and melted into the night. I slammed the door behind me and locked it, deadbolt, key in the knob, bar across the inside. My chest heaved. I leaned my back against the door, legs shaking. I clicked on the station lights. The computer flickered on, welcome screen glowing. I grabbed the charger and plugged in my radio, hands trembling. I called dispatch. I saw him. He was watching me from the window. "I'm secure for now." They asked if I needed backup. I said yes. I stuffed my jacket in a chair, turned every light on, and stared out each window until dawn. In the morning, backup arrived and we searched the woods, 2 rangers, K9, side by side. No tracks beyond those tire marks and a few muffled footprints near the gate. They dusted the station windows, no prints inside, smeared outside where he touched the glass. They found no sign of his camp or vehicle. I left the station with them at first light. I didn't stick around for the report. I drove home on empty roads, headlights on high beam, looking for that van or a flicker of movement in the trees. I never went back on solo night patrol. Now when I lock the door, I check it twice. I keep my radio plugged in. And I watch the shadows outside. All those windows face the woods. I make sure that if he comes back, I'll see him first. I left the station around 9, like I did most mornings. The sun was just coming up, thin light through the pines. I strapped on my pack radio, first aid kit, water, granola bars, and walked out to the trailhead. The path runs 5 miles up to Cedar Ridge, then back down along the creek. I was planning to finish before lunch. At first, everything was normal. I passed two hikers going up Wave, morning. No one else. The forest sounded like forest, warblers in the canopy, breeze through needles, creek gurgling far below. About 2 miles in, I noticed a branch snapped off to the side of the trail. Fresh break, leaves still green. I glanced around. Nobody there. I shrugged and kept going. An hour later, I reached the closed kiosk where folks are supposed to check in. The sign-in sheet was missing. Usually the clipboard hangs on a hook. Today it wasn't there, just a nail in the plywood. I tapped my radio. Dispatch, this is Ranger Park. Kiosk check-in missing. Copy? Static. I hit it again. No answer. I scribbled a note and pinched it under the plywood. I didn't see any footprints around, just the clear dirt of the trail. A mile past the kiosk, the forest went quiet. No birds, no wind. My boots sounded loud on the dirt. I stopped and listened. Heard my own breath. Heard a soft scrape uphill, faint, like someone shifting weight on an old log. I swung my head up the slope, nothing. I forced a smile and walked on. I almost missed him the first time. He was sitting halfway up the trail on a mossy log, head down, shoulders hunched. Old brown coat, jeans, a cap shadowing his face. No pack. I slowed to a stop maybe 8 feet away. "Hi there," I said. He looked up. Didn't speak. Didn't smile. Just stared, eyes hard to read in shadow. I waited. He didn't move. I said, "You okay? Do you need help?" He stayed silent, turned his head slightly, and lifted a finger, just one, pointing down the trail. Then he slid off the log and followed. That unsettled me, but he stayed maybe 20 yards back, so I figured he was lost. I turned and walked ahead. Tried to pick up my pace. He matched it. 10 minutes later, I glanced behind. He was still there, silent, same distance. I turned again and broke into a faster walk. My lungs burned. Behind me, soft footfalls. Around a bend, I found a fallen tree blocking half the trail. I climbed over, boots slipping on wet bark. When I landed, I expected him to be halfway across. He stood below the tree, just watching me. I swallowed and stepped past him, boots crunching leaves, and he followed. By mile 4, my stomach tightened. I kept checking my watch. 20 minutes passed when I'd normally turn around. My radio still crackled nothing. My phone had no bars. I drifted into the creek loop instead of the ridge, hoping I'd lose him in the tangle of boulders. The creek crossing was shallow but fast. I jumped from rock to rock. At the last stone, I looked back. He was on the far bank, cuff of his jeans wet, standing still. I said out loud, "This is weird." He turned and walked upstream, keeping me in sight. I felt squeezed trail on one side, creek on the other, him on the bank. I kept walking, head down, listening for splash behind. Nothing. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it above the water. The trail climbed again, steep and narrow. My knees shook. I tried talking to him, telling him I'd call help, that he could use the radio. He didn't answer, just moved along the edge of the path, watching. Finally, I reached the old fire pit in a small clearing. I dropped my pack, knelt by the stones, and slapped my hands on my thighs. He stepped into the clearing too, closed the last bit of distance, maybe 5 feet from me. I stood up, hands on my hips. "What's wrong with you?" I asked. "Why are you following me?" His cap shadowed his eyes. He didn't answer. He held out his hand. And it was a small, folded piece of paper. I stared at it. He didn't move a muscle. The air felt tight, like it wouldn't let me breathe. Above us, a jay let out that wheezy call. He looked at the paper in his hand, not at me. Then he turned, walked back into the trees, and disappeared. I flicked on my light. It was almost noon, but the canopy swallowed the sun. He was gone. I stayed in the clearing, staring at the spot he left, until I felt like I might vomit. Then I walked back to my pack and opened that paper. It said only one line, in neat block letters: they know your schedule. No signature. No symbol. Just that. My hand shook so hard I almost dropped it. I jammed the note in my pocket, grabbed my radio. Dispatch, park. I need a ride out. ASAP. It clicked back. Copy, hold tight. I slung the pack on and followed my boots back the way I'd come. I kept the paper folded in my palm, like something to hold on to. At the creek, I sprinted across stones. No sign of him behind me. I hit the kiosk and found the sign-in sheet still missing. I ripped my note off the nail, stuffed it in my pocket, and marched back. Every rustle in the underbrush made me jump. My heart didn't slow until I was within earshot of my truck. Dispatch pulled in right after I opened the gate. Ranger Jones jumped out. "Everything okay?" he asked. I waved the paper at him. I got followed. He took one look at my face, grabbed my arm, and led me to the cab. I slammed the door and locked it. He drove off-road back to the station. I watched the trees whiz by, thought about that silent man pointing down the trail. Thought about who they were. The woods looked different now, every shadow a face. At the station, I dropped the paper on a clipboard. Everyone stared. We filed a report. They rerouted patrols so I didn't have to go back out alone. I spent the rest of the day at the desk, watching the monitor, making notes on every schedule change. That night, I dug my truck keys out of my pocket. They were cold in my hand. I held them tight before I went to sleep. I was on night shift when the storm rolled in. We knew it was coming. Radar showed that squall line moving east, but it still hit faster than anyone expected. I switched my radio to the storm frequency around 9 p.m., listening to wind-blown static and a distant rumble of thunder. The station's windows rattled with each gust, and the giant pines outside bent like they'd snap at any second. At 10:03, my radio went dead. Just the usual snap and then nothing but silence and the storm. I clicked knobs, switched channels, dead. I leaned back in my chair, elbows on the desk, staring at the black speaker. Rain pounded the roof, and the lights flickered. I reached for my flashlight and headlamp just before the power dipped out. Dark settled in the station like a weight. I sat tight, waiting for the generator to kick in. It did. Dim orange bulbs hummed on. I flipped through the radio again, tried the weather channel, static. Fine. I took a sip of lukewarm coffee and peered out the window into the storm. At 10:17, the radio crackled so loud it nearly knocked me over. It didn't sound like my mic. A panicked voice, breathy, urgent, help, coordinates, 42.312, minus 110.847, please, someone, then static. My heart shot up. I grabbed the mic, dispatch, come in. Identify your unit. Over. Nothing but rain in that static pulse. I keyed again, come in. Over. Still nothing. I sat back and replayed the voice in my head. The coordinates were deep off any maintained trail, miles from the access road. No campgrounds that far north, no backcountry permits issued there. At 10:25, it happened again. Please, stuck, cabin, water rising, 42.312, minus 110.847. That time I heard it clearly. It was a man, maybe mid-30s, voice cracking. My throat went dry. I checked the log, no overdue hikers, no missing person alerts anywhere near those coordinates. Our last report of anyone off trail was a group of birdwatchers who called it quits at 6 p.m. and came back to the trailhead. Everybody checked in. No one was out there. My stomach lurched. I double-checked the generator panel, light steady, radio powered. I keyed again. This is Ranger Ellis. I have your coordinates. Repeat, I have your coordinates. Over. No answer. I flipped on my GPS unit, charger cable mangled, battery low, but it still lit up. I punched in the numbers, 42.312, minus 110.847. The dot flashed at the far end of the park boundary, where an old fire watch cabin sat abandoned 10 years ago. Park rules said no one was allowed up there. The trail had washed out 3 seasons back. It was a slog through broke brush and broken switchbacks. My radio crackled again. Please hurry, then static. I looked at the storm outside and thought, this is stupid. I was alone up here in a one-room station with no reliable comms, and some guy was calling me from a ghost cabin 3 miles up a washed-out trail in a thunderstorm. But I couldn't do nothing. If someone was actually stuck, they could drown in flooding washes, or get hit by lightning up there. I grabbed my rain jacket, strapped on my headlamp, locked the station door behind me, and started out. The wind slammed me sideways when I hit the gravel. I kept low, flashlight beam cutting through sheets of rain. I punched the GPS into my old Android and followed the track up the hill. The Ranger truck stayed by the road, tire tracks gone cold on the gravel. My boots squeaked as I crept along the old switchback. Branches slashed at my face. Every step I thought the voice would come back on the radio. I'm here, but dead silence, just thunder rumbling. At 10:45, I checked my watch. The rain was starting to pool in gaps on the trail. A flash lit the sky, and I saw the creek swollen into a brown churn. If he's up there. I pushed on. By 11, I hit the old Fire Watch Trail junction. The sign was half tilted, letters faded to moss green. The washed out section was ahead, rocks piled in the wash, trees leaning across fallen trunks. I dropped down into the debris field, boots slipping on mud. I sloshed across a half-submerged log, heart hammering. I stared at my light's reflection, shaky, strobing. Then I saw it, a bright orange pack wedged under a root, straps wet, zipper open. I dropped to my knees. No one here, no other packs, nothing except some spare water pouches. I called into the storm. I'm at the old cabin site. Anyone here? The rain swallowed my voice. I shone my light toward the trees behind the pack and noticed footprints on the muddy ground, barely 6 inches long, no boot tread, just barefoot impressions. They led from the pack toward the cabin site. I got up and followed them, flashlight dancing on bent trunks. I stumbled into a small clearing, the ruins of the old cabin, 2 stone walls, collapsed roof, digested by moss. Water dripped through sky gaps. In the center was my caller, a guy, soaked, crouched by a half-collapsed floorboard. When I hit my light on him, he flinched. I rushed to his side. Are you okay? You're safe now. He looked at me blankly, eyes red-rimmed. I knelt. What happened? Who are you? He didn't answer. Lightning cracked overhead, thunder shook the ground. He lifted his hand and pointed beside him. Under the floorboard was a soggy, handwritten journal and a phone. I pried up the board, water pooled under it, but the phone was intact. I handed it to him. Here. Use this. He grabbed it, keyed the screen, unreadable water smears. I checked the journal. Pages were smudged, but on the first page, scrawled, "They left me to die." That was it. He closed his eyes, head slumping forward. I put my arm around him. Come on. I'm taking you back. He nodded once. I helped him stand and wrapped his arm over my shoulder. He was so light. I pulled out my phone, no bars, and dialed dispatch. Signal flickered, Ellis to dispatch. I found a male hiker, no ID, at the old cabin coordinates. Over. The rain fell so hard I barely heard the crackle of the radio. Dispatch said backup was en route, but they might be hours. I cursed and tightened my grip. We limped back through the wash, me guiding him along the path I just hacked. Branches whipped our faces. I counted steps. I tried to keep him conscious, talking. What's your name? Where are you from? He didn't speak. Just the sound of rain in our ears. I reached the base of the switchback, gasping. The vegetation thinned. I could see the station roof's orange beacon through the trees. I yelled, "There it is." He nodded, squeezed my arm. The storm was lighter there. We staggered to the truck. I hauled him in, shut the door. He collapsed in the passenger seat. I threw on the wipers, backed out onto the road. Inside the station, I got him dry clothes and blankets. I made tea, told him to drink. He sipped, eyes fixed on the wall. I went to the computer and typed in his description, no overdue hiker. I checked missing reports, nothing matched. No one registered as missing that night, no permits off trail. I brought him a plate of soup. You need a name. How do I call you? He looked down at the bowl. Then he said, softly, Adam. Just that. By morning the storm had passed. Adam sat on a cot, sipping coffee. I had called the sheriff, deputies were inbound. I took him outside to get some air. He pointed at the station, then at my ranger truck, then at the woods. I was listening, he said. To the radio. His voice wavered. I heard someone every night, calling for help. I frowned. It was 1017, 10:25. You heard that? He nodded. I handed him the spare radio mic. Here, take this. You want to talk to them again? He shook his head. Deputies arrived. They checked his pockets, no ID except an old business card with Adam Reynolds and a phone number that went nowhere. They logged him in and asked questions. I stood outside, watching them usher him into the cruiser. Right before the door closed, Adam turned and said, I was buried down there. He pointed to the cabin site. They left me to die. Then the door slammed. I drove back to that site at first light, boots on wet ground. The pack and journal were gone, just the floorboard and muddy boots prints leading off into the forest, not returning. No body, no source of the voice. Just rain-soaked earth, the collapsed walls, and a radio tower humming in the distance. I never heard those coordinates again. The journal never turned up. Adam's case went cold, no missing report, no family. Sometimes I walk that washed-out trail in the sun and wonder who was really calling me in the storm, why he believed someone would answer. But all I have is the memory of his voice over the static, begging, and the sight of him crouched in that cabin, waiting for me to show up before the water rose any higher.